At my son's funeral, while the room was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and fake grief, his wife's secret lover leaned over to me. He placed a heavy, patronizing hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Don't worry, old man. I will spend his millions better than he ever did." He thought I was just a broken, senile father, too grief-stricken to understand his cruelty. He didn't know I was recording every single word, but the real shock didn't come from me. 3 seconds after his whisper, a low, cold chuckle echoed through the silent room. It wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from inside the closed mahogany coffin. My daughter-in-law screamed. The lover froze, his face draining of color, and I just smiled, because the game was only just beginning. Before we dive into this twisted tale of betrayal and justice, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you believe traitors deserve exactly what is coming to them. Now let's go back to the moment the lid of that coffin was supposed to stay closed forever. I stood there stiff in my black wool suit, staring at the polished mahogany box that supposedly held the body of my only son, Tyson. I am Winston Carver, 67 years old. I grew up in the projects of Chicago, fighting for every scrap of bread, every dollar, every inch of respect I ever earned. I built a real estate empire from nothing but grit and concrete. I have faced gang leaders, corrupt politicians, and cutthroat corporate sharks without blinking. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares a father to bury his child. Or at least, that is what everyone in the room thought. To them, I was just the grieving father, the retired old man who spent his days gardening and reading newspapers, oblivious to the modern world. They saw my gray hair and my cane and assumed my mind had softened along with my body. They were wrong. My mind is as sharp as the switchblade I used to carry in my boot in 1975. I looked around the VIP viewing room of the funeral home. It was disgusting. Not the room itself, which was draped in velvet and marble, costing more for 3 hours than my mother made in her entire life. No, what was disgusting was the performance happening in the front row. Skylar, my daughter-in-law, was putting on the show of a lifetime. She was dressed in a custom-made black dress that fit a little too perfectly, crying into a lace handkerchief that remained suspiciously dry. She was 30 years old, a former swimsuit model who had charmed my son 5 years ago. Tyson was smart with business, a genius with numbers, but he was a fool for love. He saw a broken bird that needed saving. I saw a hawk looking for a nest to raid. I watched her closely. My eyes, trained to spot cracks in building foundations, spotted the cracks in her act. She was slumped over in grief, her face buried in her hands, but through the gap in her fingers I saw the glow of her smartwatch. She wasn't looking at photos of her late husband. She was checking the stock market. Specifically, she was checking the stock price of Carver Holdings. She swiped her finger, refreshing the page, her eyes narrowing as she calculated her net worth now that the CEO was dead. She was already counting the money before the dirt even hit the lid. And then there was Brock, standing right behind her, acting the part of the supportive best friend and loyal CFO. Brock was 35, the same age as Tyson. They had gone to business school together. Tyson trusted him like a brother. I never did. Brock had the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind of handshake that felt slippery. He stood with his hand resting on the back of Skylar's chair, his fingers brushing against her shoulder a little too intimately for a grieving friend. He looked solemn, nodding at the guests, accepting condolences on behalf of the company. But I saw the way his jaw clenched with impatience. He checked his gold Rolex every 2 minutes. He wanted this over. He wanted the reading of the will. He wanted the keys to the kingdom. The air in the room was suffocating. The organ music droned on, a mournful sound that felt like a drill into my skull. I stood alone near the head of the casket. I had refused to sit. A Carver stands to face the storm. People whispered as they walked by, casting pitying glances my way. Poor Winston. He has no one left. Who will take care of the empire? He looks so frail. I let them whisper. Information is ammunition, and when people think you are weak, they speak freely. They lower their shields. That was when Brock decided to make his move. He walked over to me, his Italian leather shoes clicking softly on the marble floor. He stopped right beside me, smelling of expensive scotch and arrogance. He didn't look at the coffin. He looked at the crowd, waving slightly to a board member in the back, ensuring he was seen as the man in charge. Then he leaned in close to my ear. He invaded my personal space, a power move he often used in boardrooms to intimidate junior executives. He put his hand on my shoulder, giving it a squeeze that was meant to be comforting, but felt like a vice. "Winston," He said, his voice low and smooth like oil on water. "You should sit down. You look terrible. It's over now. Let the younger generation handle the burden." I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes fixed on the brass handles of the casket. I remained silent, the trembling old man he expected me to be. My silence emboldened him. It always does with narcissists. They mistake silence for submission. He leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear, dropping the facade completely because he thought no one else could hear, and he thought I was too broken to matter. "Don't worry, old man," he whispered, the venom dripping from every syllable. "I will spend his millions better than he ever did. And Skylar, I'll take good care of her too, better than Tyson ever could." The disrespect was physical. It hit me in the chest like a sledgehammer. He was confessing his affair and his greed over my son's body. He was spitting on Tyson's memory. In my younger days back in Chicago, I would have broken his jaw before he finished the sentence. I would have dragged him out to the alley and taught him a lesson about respect that requires a feeding tube to recover from. My hand tightened around the handle of my cane. The urge to strike him was overwhelming. The rage boiled in my gut, hot and acidic. But I am not that young brawler anymore. I am a strategist. And a strategist knows that you do not strike when the enemy expects it. You strike when they are celebrating their victory. I slowly turned my head to look at him. I let my eyes go wide and watery, feigning confusion and shock. "Brock," I stammered, my voice shaking perfectly. How could you?" He smirked. A cruel, ugly twist of his lips. "Because I won Winston. The future belongs to the strong. Go home. Go die quietly." He patted my cheek. A final insult. Then he turned to walk back to Skylar, straightening his jacket, ready to play the grieving hero again. He took 1 step, 2 steps, and then it happened. It started soft, a low, guttural sound, like gravel grinding together. Brock stopped. He frowned, looking around, thinking it was someone in the crowd clearing their throat. Heh, heh, heh. The sound grew louder. It was distinct now. It was a laugh. But it wasn't a happy laugh. It was a cold, dry, humorless chuckle. And it wasn't coming from the crowd. It was coming from the box. The room went dead silent. The organ player stopped abruptly, his hands hovering over the keys. The whispers ceased. The air conditioning hummed, sounding like a jet engine in the sudden quiet. Every eye in the room turned toward the front, toward the mahogany coffin that sat on the raised platform surrounded by white wreaths. Brock slowly turned back around, his face pale. He looked at me, then at the coffin. He looked like a man trying to solve a physics equation that didn't make sense. "Ha! Ha! Ha!" The laugh echoed again, louder this time, amplified by the acoustics of the room. It was unmistakably Tyson's laugh. I saw the moment recognition hit Skylar. She was sitting in the front row, scrolling on her phone 1 second, and the next, she froze. Her phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the floor. She stared at the wooden box, her mouth opening in a silent scream that finally found its voice. "He's alive!" she shrieked, scrambling backward, tripping over her own chair. She fell to the floor, crawling away like a crab, her eyes bulging. "Oh my God, he's alive!" Panic rippled through the room. People gasped. Some stood up. A woman in the back fainted. The funeral director, a man named Mr. Henderson, who I had paid very handsomely to be part of this theater, stood by the door, blocking the exit with a solemn face. Brock was paralyzed. He stood between me and the coffin, his hands shaking. He stared at the lid, expecting it to burst open, expecting a zombie, a ghost, a miracle. He didn't know what to expect. Fear does that to a man. It strips away the arrogance and leaves only the animal instinct. But the lid didn't move. The coffin remained sealed. I reached into the pocket of my jacket. I didn't pull out a handkerchief to dry my eyes. I pulled out my smartphone. I tapped the screen once. The laughter from the coffin stopped abruptly. It was replaced by a voice recorded in high definition, a voice that boomed from the hidden subwoofer I had personally installed inside the casket lining the night before. "Brock," the voice said. It was Tyson, clear, strong, angry. "You forgot one thing about me, buddy. You forgot that I learned from my father, and my father always told me to record the important meetings." Brock stumbled back as if he had been punched. He looked at the coffin, then he looked at me. The realization began to dawn on him. This wasn't a resurrection. This was a trap. Skylar was sobbing on the floor, but they weren't fake tears anymore. They were tears of pure terror. "Make it stop," she screamed. "Make it stop." I tapped my phone again. The audio shifted. "Don't worry, babe," came Brock's voice from the coffin. It was a recording of him. A recording taken 3 weeks ago in his office. Just a little more arsenic in his tea. He's already weak. The doctors think it's an autoimmune disease. Once he's gone, the old man will be too broken to fight us. We sell the company, we take the cash, and we disappear to Rio. The gasp from the crowd was so loud it sucked the oxygen out of the room. The board members, the family friends, the business partners, they all heard it. They heard the murder plot, they heard the infidelity, they heard the greed. Brock looked at me, his eyes wide with madness. You crazy old bat, you bugged my office." "I didn't bug your office," I said, my voice finally dropping the trembling act. I stood up straight, my spine stiff, my cane resting lightly on the floor. My voice was deep resonant, the voice that had commanded construction sites for 40 years. My son bugged his own office. Because unlike you, he wasn't blind. He just needed proof. "Shut it off," Brock roared. He lunged toward the coffin, perhaps thinking he could smash the speaker, silence the evidence. But before he could touch the polished wood, the double doors of the funeral hall burst open. It wasn't the police. Not yet. I don't trust the police to handle family business until the table is set. It was my security team. 4 men built like linebackers dressed in suits that cost more than Brock's car. They stepped in, blocking the exits, crossing their arms. And behind them, walking with a heavy limp leaning on a crutch, his head wrapped in bandages, was the man who was supposed to be in the box. Tyson Carver walked into his own funeral. Skylar stopped screaming. She looked at the coffin, then at the door, then back at the coffin. Her brain couldn't process the reality. Her husband was dead. She had seen the medical report. She had identified the body. She had planned the funeral. But there he was, alive, battered, bruised, looking like he had crawled out of hell itself, but alive. He walked past the stunned guests. He walked past his weeping, treacherous wife without even glancing at her. He walked straight up to Brock. Brock was shaking his head. No, I saw the crash. I saw the car burn. You died. I saw the report." "You saw what we wanted you to see," I said, stepping up beside my son. "We put a lot of effort into that crash, Brock. It cost me 2 vintage Mercedes and a very talented special effects crew from Hollywood. But it was worth every penny to see the look on your face right now." Tyson looked at his former best friend. He didn't yell. He didn't hit him. He just reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto the floor at Brock's feet. "That's your termination letter," Tyson said, his voice raspy from the smoke inhalation he had actually suffered during the staged accident. "And the medical report confirming the arsenic levels in my blood, and the video of you and Skylar celebrating my accident with champagne 2 hours after it happened." Skylar scrambled up from the floor, her survival instinct finally kicking in. She rushed toward Tyson, her hands reaching out her face, twisting into a mask of relief. "Baby. Oh, thank God I didn't know. He tricked me. Brock tricked me. I thought you were dead. I love you so much." She tried to grab his arm. Tyson didn't move away. He just looked at her. He looked at her with eyes that were completely dead. "Don't touch me," he said. Skylar froze. Tyson turned to the crowd. "Open it," he commanded, pointing at the coffin. 2 of my security guards stepped forward. They unlatched the heavy brass locks of the casket. The room held its breath. Skylar covered her mouth. Brock looked like he was about to vomit. The guards lifted the heavy lid. The coffin wasn't empty. Inside, resting on the white satin pillow, was a single object. It wasn't a body. It wasn't a mannequin. It was a large framed portrait of Brock and Skylar taken by a private investigator, showing them kissing on a yacht in the Mediterranean, a trip they claimed was a business conference while Tyson was in the hospital undergoing chemotherapy for the poison they had been feeding him. And right across the glass of the photo, written in thick red marker, was one word: guilty. The silence broke. The room erupted into chaos. Journalists who had been lurking in the back flashed their cameras. Board members were shouting. And in the distance, growing louder by the second, came the sirens of the Chicago Police Department. I looked at Brock. He wasn't arrogant anymore. He was a cornered rat. And rats, when cornered, do desperate things. He looked at the security guards blocking the door. He looked at Tyson, who was injured and slow. And then he looked at me, the old man, the weak link. He pulled a small silver pistol from his ankle holster. "Nobody move!" he screamed, grabbing Skylar and pulling her in front of him as a human shield. "I'm walking out of here." I didn't flinch. I just looked at him with pity. "You really don't know who you're dealing with, do you, son?" I said calmly. I snapped my fingers. And that was when the lights went out. The emergency lights flickered and buzzed overhead, casting long, dancing shadows across the funeral hall like ghosts enjoying a private show. My security team had moved with the precision of a pack of wolves during the 3 seconds of darkness. When the main floodlights slammed back on with a deafening hum, Brock was no longer holding a pistol. He was on his knees, his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that made me wince just looking at it. His silver gun lay skittering across the marble floor, stopping right at the tip of a black rubber crutch. The owner of that crutch took another step forward. Tyson Carver. My son looked less like a corporate executive and more like a soldier returning from a war that nobody else knew was being fought. The bandages wrapped around his forehead were stained with real dried blood, and his leg was encased in a heavy medical boot. But it was his eyes that terrified the room. They were burning with a cold blue fire that I had not seen since he was a teenager fighting off bullies in the schoolyard. Skylar was hyperventilating on the floor, clutching her chest as if her heart were trying to escape her ribs. She looked up at the man she had buried an hour ago. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on a hook, but no sound came out. The shock was absolute. The silence in the room was heavy enough to crush bones. The board members and business partners who had come to network over a corpse were now pressed against the walls, desperate to be invisible. Tyson didn't say a word to her. Not yet. He limped past her trembling form and stood over Brock. The CFO looked up, sweat beading on his forehead, his expensive suit rumpled and dusty. "I told you to run the numbers again," Brock Tyson said, his voice raspy and damaged from the smoke of the crash. "You always forgot to carry the one." "You calculated the payout from my life insurance, but you forgot to calculate the survival instinct of a Carver." Brock spat on the floor, trying to regain some shred of dignity. "You are dead. I saw the coroner's report. I paid the coroner myself." "You paid a man who works for my father," Tyson corrected him. "You paid for a piece of paper. My father paid for loyalty 20 years ago when he paid for that coroner's medical school tuition. You can buy a man for a day, Brock, but you earn a man for a lifetime." I stepped forward, tapping my cane on the floor to get the room's attention. "The exits are sealed," I announced, my voice booming off the vaulted ceiling. "The police are 5 minutes out, but before they get here, we are going to have a little family meeting." Skylar finally found her voice. It was a shrill, desperate screech. "This is insanity. He is an imposter. My husband is dead. Look at him. That is not Tyson. He is a monster." Tyson turned to her slowly. The movement was painful to watch. I knew how much every inch of movement cost him. The crash we staged was controlled, but the injuries were real enough. We had to make it look convincing. "I am a monster?" Skylar Tyson asked softly. He reached into the inside pocket of his tattered jacket. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a thick, bound stack of papers. He threw them at her. The papers fluttered down like snow, landing all around her black designer dress. "Read it," Tyson commanded. Skylar picked up a page, her hands shaking so violently she almost ripped the paper. She scanned the medical jargon. Her eyes widened. "Thallium," Tyson said. "Colorless, odorless, tasteless, the poison of choice for the coward. You started dosing me 6 months ago. Just a little bit in my morning protein shake. Just a pinch in my evening wine. Enough to make my hair fall out. Enough to make me vomit blood. Enough to make the doctors think I had developed a rare autoimmune disorder." Skylar shook her head, tears streaming down her face again, but I knew they were tears of panic, not regret. "No, baby, no. I took care of you. I nursed you. I sat by your bed every night. You sat by my bed to make sure I was dying," Tyson roared, and the sound echoed like thunder. "You sat there watching the life drain out of me, and you texted your lover about which yacht you were going to buy with the insurance money. I stepped in then. It was time for them to know the full extent of their failure." "You thought you were so clever, Skylar," I said, walking until I was standing right over her. "You thought the old man was too busy with his roses to notice his son was wasting away. But I noticed. I noticed Tyson getting sick every time he ate your cooking. I noticed he got better when he went on business trips." I pointed a finger at her, a finger that had once pointed at blueprints for skyscrapers. 2 months ago, I broke into your kitchen while you were out at your Pilates class. I found the little vial hidden inside the container of organic matcha powder. I didn't take it. That would have tipped you off. I swapped it." Skylar froze. She looked up at me. her face a mask of pure horror. "You swapped it," she whispered. "Sugar," I said with a cold smile. "For the last 8 weeks you have been poisoning my son with high-grade stevia sweetener. Every time you thought you were killing him, you were just making his coffee a little sweeter. And while you were doing that, I was collecting his blood samples and sending them to a private lab in Zurich." Tyson kicked the pile of papers toward her. "It is all there, Skylar. The toxicology reports, the dates, the levels of heavy metals in my system from the first 4 months. And the sudden drop to 0 in the last 2 months when Dad switched the supply. You didn't kill me. You didn't even come close. You just gave me enough time to build a case that will put you in a cell until your hair turns gray and your teeth fall out." Brock tried to struggle against the guard holding him. "You have nothing," he yelled, desperate to regain control. "This is entrapment. This is assault. I will sue you for everything you have." "You can try," Tyson said calmly, "but it is hard to sue someone when you are facing charges for conspiracy to commit murder, corporate embezzlement, and fraud." Tyson looked at the crowd of stunned onlookers. "I want everyone to look at them," he said, his voice steady and strong. "Look at the grieving widow. Look at the loyal best friend. This is what greed looks like. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to watch me wither away and die in agony while they planned their vacation." Skylar slowly stood up. She brushed the papers off her dress. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara across her cheek. She didn't look like a broken woman anymore. The fear was evaporating, replacing itself with something much darker, something sharper. I watched her transformation closely. I knew that look. It was the look of a cornered animal realizing it has one last option. She wasn't looking at Tyson with love or regret. She was looking at him like a problem that still needed to be solved. She straightened her spine. She fixed her hair. She looked at the guests who were staring at her with judgment and disgust. And then she laughed. It wasn't a hysterical laugh. It was a cold, calculating laugh that matched the one Tyson had made from the coffin. "You think you have won," she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing all the sweetness she had faked for years. "You think because you are alive, you have won. You are pathetic, both of you." She turned to face Tyson. She looked him up and down, her eyes lingering on his bandages, his crutch, his shaking hand. "Look at you," she sneered. "You are a wreck. You are physically broken. You are mentally unstable. You just crashed your own funeral. You are shouting about conspiracies and poisons." She turned to the crowd, raising her voice so everyone could hear. "My husband has been suffering from severe paranoia for a year," she announced. "The brain tumor that the doctors suspected caused him to hallucinate. It made him believe everyone was trying to kill him. That is why he staged this accident. That is why he is here now attacking me. He has lost his mind." I stepped forward. "That is a lie, Skylar. We have the medical reports." "Do you?" she shot back. "Do you have a court order? Do you have a police report validating those papers? Or do you just have some printouts from a private lab that you paid for?" She reached into her purse. My guards tensed, ready to tackle her if she pulled a weapon. But she didn't pull a gun. She pulled out a sleek black phone. She dialed a number and put it on speaker. "Dr. Evans," she said clearly. "I am at the funeral home. My husband is alive. He has suffered a psychotic break. He is violent. He is delusional. Please execute the order immediately." A voice on the other end, crisp and professional, answered. "We are already on site, Mrs. Carver. We were waiting for your signal." The double doors at the back of the room swung open again, but this time it wasn't police. It wasn't my security. 6 men in white medical uniforms marched in. They were big, thick-necked men carrying restraints in a medical bag. They weren't doctors. They were orderlies from the private psychiatric facility Skylar had been donating to for years. Skylar smiled. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. "You forgot one thing, Tyson," she said softly, walking toward him, while the orderlies formed a wall behind her. "You signed a medical power of attorney 3 years ago. You gave me full guardianship over your medical decisions if you were ever incapacitated." She pointed at his leg, at his bandages, at his shaking hands. "You are incapacitated," she declared. "You are mentally unstable. You are a danger to yourself and others. And as your legal guardian, I am committing you to immediate psychiatric care." The orderlies stepped forward, pulling sedatives from their bags. "Take him," Skylar ordered, her voice cold as ice. "He is having an episode. Sedate him." Tyson tried to raise his crutch to defend himself, but he was weak. He was injured. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with disbelief. We had planned for violence. We had planned for denial. We had not planned for her to use the law as a weapon against us. I moved to intercept them, but two of the orderlies blocked my path. "Step aside, Mr. Carver," one of them said. "This is a medical emergency authorized by the patient's legal guardian. Interference is a felony." Schuyler looked at me over the shoulder of the orderly. "You can't save him, Winston," she said. "You can't save him with money. You can't save him with muscle. The law is on my side. He belongs to me, and this time I will make sure he never leaves that hospital room." The orderlies lunged for Tyson. The room erupted into chaos again. But this time the fear wasn't in Schuyler's eyes, it was in mine. She wasn't just a greedy wife. She was a master manipulator, and she had just checkmated us on our own board. One of the orderlies grabbed Tyson by his injured shoulder, and my son let out a cry of agony that tore through my chest like a jagged piece of glass. That sound flipped a switch inside me that I had not touched since I left the streets of Chicago 30 years ago. I was no longer the retired CEO or the grieving father. I was a man protecting his blood. I did not hesitate. I reached into the waistband of my trousers and pulled out the Smith & Wesson revolver I have carried every day since 1985. I leveled the barrel directly at the kneecap of the lead orderly. "Back off," I snarled. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. The room froze instantly. The orderly who had his hands on Tyson let go as if he had touched a live wire. He threw his hands up, stepping back slowly, his eyes glued to the dark metal in my hand. Schuyler shrieked, diving behind a marble pillar. The funeral guests, who had been paralyzed by the drama, now scrambled for cover, knocking over flower arrangements and chairs in their panic. "You are making a mistake, Mr. Carver," the head orderly said, his voice trembling but trying to maintain authority. "This is a legal medical hold. You are committing a felony." I pulled back the hammer of the revolver. The mechanical click echoed in the silent hall, loud as a gunshot. "Touch my son again and you will never walk again," I promised him. "I do not care about your paperwork. I do not care about the law. You are kidnapping a man against his will, and in my book that gives me the right to put you down." Tyson slumped against the wall, breathing heavy sweat pouring down his face from the pain in his leg. He looked at me with gratitude but also fear. He knew what happens to black men who pulled guns in public spaces, even rich black men. He knew the optics were against us. Schuyler knew it too. From behind the pillar, she screamed, "He has a gun. He is going to kill us all. Call the SWAT team. Shoot him." The orderlies looked at each other, communicating silently. They were big men used to manhandling confused patients, but they were not soldiers. They were not paid enough to take a bullet from an angry father. They began to back away, creating a circle of empty space around me and Tyson. I kept the gun steady, my hand not shaking an inch. I was ready to pull the trigger. God help me, I wanted to pull it. I wanted to hurt the people who had hurt my boy. Suddenly the wail of sirens cut through the tension. Blue and red lights flashed against the stained glass windows of the funeral home. Heavy boots pounded on the pavement outside. The double doors crashed open again, but this time it was uniformed officers. Schuyler ran toward them, tears streaming down her face, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Officer, help!" she screamed. "He is crazy. He has a gun. He is holding us hostage. Arrest him. Shoot him." The officers raised their weapons, training them on me. "Drop the weapon. Drop it now." I did not drop it. I slowly lowered it to my side, engaging the safety and placing it gently on the floor. I raised my hands, showing my empty palms. "Stand down," a booming voice commanded from the entryway. A large man in a white shirt and gold badge pushed through the line of officers. It was Chief of Police Marcus Thorne. He was a man I had known since he was a rookie beat cop patrolling the neighborhoods where I built my first affordable housing units. I had funded the Police Athletic League for 20 years. I had paid for his daughter's leukemia treatment anonymously when his insurance denied it. Thorne looked at the scene. He looked at Schuyler, hysterical and disheveled. He looked at Brock, pinned by my guards, but smirking. He looked at Tyson, broken and bleeding. And he looked at me. "Chief, arrest him!" Schuyler yelled, her voice shrill. He threatened medical personnel. "I am the legal guardian of that man, and his father is obstructing justice." Thorne walked past her without even glancing in her direction. He walked straight up to me. He looked at the gun on the floor, then looked me in the eye. "Winston," he said, his voice calm. You want to tell me why you are waving a piece around in a house of God? They tried to take my boy Marcus, I said, keeping my hands visible. She has a piece of paper signed by a crooked doctor. They were going to drug him and drag him out the back door. Thorne turned to the lead orderly. Is this true? The orderly puffed up his chest, trying to look official. We have a signed order from Dr. Evans for an involuntary psychiatric hold. Mrs. Carver is the guardian. We are within our rights. Thorne snatched the clipboard from the orderly's hand. He scanned the paper for 2 seconds, then ripped it in half. Dr. Evans is currently under investigation for insurance fraud and writing illegal prescriptions, Thorne said flatly. His signature is worth less than the toilet paper in the restroom. And as for you boys, unless you want me to charge you with attempted kidnapping and assault, I suggest you get your van and get the hell out of my city. The color drained from the orderly's face. He looked at Schuyler, then at the shredded paper on the floor. He signaled his team. They grabbed their bags and retreated, backing out the door faster than they had entered. Schuyler stood there, her mouth agape. You can't do that. That is a legal document. I will sue you. I will have your badge, Lady Thorne said, turning on her with a glare that could melt steel. You are currently a person of interest in an attempted murder investigation. I suggest you shut your mouth before I find a reason to put you in handcuffs right now. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Tyson slid down the wall, sitting on the floor, exhausted. We had won the physical battle. We had the law on our side, or so I thought. But I had forgotten about the snake in the corner. Brock had been silent during the standoff. He had watched the gun, he had watched the police, and he had watched his hired muscle flee. But he didn't look defeated. He looked amused. He shook off the grip of my security guard and straightened his tie. He dusted off his jacket casually, as if he had just tripped on a rug instead of being exposed as a murderer. Very dramatic, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. Very touching. The cavalry arrives to save the day. He walked over to Schuyler, who was trembling with rage and fear. He put an arm around her, not with affection, but with possession. You can arrest us if you want, Chief, he said coolly. You can charge us with poisoning or fraud or whatever fairy tale this old man has spun. But it won't matter. He looked at me and his eyes were dead. They were the eyes of a man who had sold his soul a long time ago and gotten a good price for it. Check your phone, Winston, he said. I frowned. What are you talking about? Your phone, Brock repeated. The banking alert. It should have come through about 10 minutes ago, right when your son was making his big speech. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach, a different kind of fear. Not the fear of violence, but the fear of ruin. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. There was a notification from the bank, a transfer alert. I opened the app. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering. I looked at the balance of the Carver Holdings corporate account. The account that held the liquidity for our current projects. The account that held the family trust. The account that held $50 million as of this morning. Balance zero. I stared at the screen. The numbers blurred. Zero. I looked up at Brock. He was smiling. It was a wide, shark-like smile. You forgot about the bylaws, Winston, he said, enjoying every word. The absent CEO clause. If the CEO is incapacitated or dead, the CFO has the authority to liquidate assets to protect shareholder value in the event of a crisis. He pointed at the coffin. We held a funeral today, Winston. Officially, Tyson is dead. The death certificate was filed this morning, and as of 10:00 a.m., I was the acting authority of Carver Holdings. I executed a sale of 51% of the company's stock to a private equity firm in Dubai. The wire transfer cleared 12 minutes ago. He pulled Schuyler closer to him. We don't need the house. We don't need the insurance. We have the company. Or rather, we have the money from the company. It is sitting in an offshore account in the Caymans right now. Untouchable. Schuyler looked at him, and the realization dawned on her face. Her terror vanished instantly, replaced by a greedy hunger. You did it, she whispered. You actually did it. Brock nodded. I told you I would take care of it. He looked at me one last time. So go ahead, Winston. Arrest us. We will make bail in an hour. We have the best lawyers money can buy because we have all the money. And you are just a retired old man with a broken son and an empty bank account. You built an empire and I sold it for parts in an afternoon. He laughed. It wasn't the chuckle from the coffin. It was the laugh of a man who had won the game. Come on, babe, let's go, he said to Schuyler. They walked past the police chief, who stood there stunned. They walked past me. They walked out of the funeral home and into the sunlight, leaving us in the cold, dark room. I looked at my phone again. 0. 50 years of sweat, blood, and sacrifice, gone with a click of a button. Tyson looked up at me from the floor, his eyes filled with despair. "Dad," he whispered, "what do we do?" I looked at the empty coffin. I looked at the exit where the thieves had just walked out, and I felt the Chicago winter settle into my bones. "We survive, son," I said quietly. "We survive. And then we hunt." The drive back to the estate was quiet. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb. Tyson stared out the window of the black SUV, his jaw set so tight I could hear his teeth grinding. I watched the familiar streets of Chicago roll by. The gray sky was beginning to weep, a cold drizzle that promised to turn into a downpour. We pulled up to the wrought iron gates of the Carver mansion, the house I had built brick by brick 30 years ago, the house where I raised my son, the house where my wife took her last breath. The driver punched the code into the keypad. Nothing happened. The red light blinked, mocking us. He tried again. Access denied. I saw movement on the second-floor balcony. The French doors opened and Skylar stepped out. She was still wearing her black funeral dress, but she held a glass of white wine in one hand and a cigarette in the other. She looked down at us like a queen looking at peasants begging for bread. She pressed the intercom button on the gate. "Lost something, boys?" she asked, her voice tinny and distorted through the speaker. "Open the gate, Skylar," Tyson shouted through the window. "This is my house," was she corrected, taking a long drag from her cigarette. "Was your house. You really should read the fine print of your own company assets, honey. The mansion is owned by Carver Holdings, and since Brock sold Carver Holdings this morning, the mansion now belongs to the new majority shareholder. And I am currently the guest of honor." She laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. I looked past the gate to the driveway. My eyes narrowed. Scattered across the wet pavement were piles of clothes, suits, shoes, photo albums. My wife's collection of porcelain angels lay shattered in 1,000 pieces on the asphalt. They had not just locked us out. They had erased us. "Get off my property," Skylar hissed, "or I will call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. And Tyson, you might want to pick up your crutches from the gutter. You are going to need them." She turned her back on us and walked back inside, slamming the balcony doors shut. Tyson opened the car door and stumbled out. He grabbed the iron bars of the gate, shaking them, screaming in frustration. His bandages were soaking up the rain. He looked wild. He looked broken. He looked like he was ready to climb the fence and tear the house down with his bare hands. I stepped out of the car. The rain was cold against my skin, but my blood was running hot. I walked over to my son. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Let it go, son," I said. He spun around, looking at me with wild eyes. "Let it go, Dad. That is our home. Mom's things are in there." "They threw Mom's things in the mud. It is just brick and mortar, Tyson," I said, my voice low and steady. "It is just stuff. Your mother isn't in that house. She is in you, and she is in me. But they won." He choked out tears mixing with the rain on his face. "They took the company. They took the house. We have nothing. We are standing on the street with nothing." I looked at the house one last time. I looked at the dark windows where the traitors were probably celebrating their victory. I didn't feel defeated. I felt focused. "Get in the car," I ordered him. Tyson hesitated, but he saw the look in my eye. He saw the same look I had when I faced down the union bosses in '82. He got back in the car. We drove away, leaving the shattered pieces of our past in the driveway. The rain came down harder, washing away the dust of the funeral home, but it could not wash away the stain of betrayal. We didn't go to a hotel. We didn't go to a friend's house. I gave the driver an address that made him look at me in the rearview mirror with confusion. We ended up parked under a flickering street lamp in an alleyway that smelled of wet cardboard and old grease. Tyson looked out the window. "Dad, why are we stopping here?" he asked. "Because this is where the real work begins," I said. We got out. We stood under the small awning of a closed pawn shop while the rain poured down in sheets. It was just the two of us. Two men in expensive suits standing in a part of town where suits usually meant you were either a cop or a corpse. Tyson leaned against the brick wall, shivering. "Dad, I don't understand. Brock sold 51%. He transferred the money. It is gone. How do we come back from this?" I lit a cigar, protecting the flame from the wind with my cupped hand. The smoke curled up gray and thick. "Do you remember the first lesson I taught you about business?" I asked him. Tyson shook his head, wiping water from his eyes. "Dad, not now." "Answer me," I snapped. "What was the first lesson?" He sighed. "Don't put all your eggs in one basket." "Exactly," I said, taking a puff. "Brock thinks he emptied the basket. He thinks he took the eggs, the chickens, and the farm. He thinks he sold the company to a private equity firm in Dubai." I looked at Tyson and allowed a small, cold smile to touch my lips. "Who do you think owns that firm in Dubai, Tyson?" Tyson stared at me. The rain dripped from his nose. "What?" "The firm," I said. "The one that bought the shares. The one Brock was so eager to sell to. Who do you think is behind the curtain?" Tyson's eyes widened. "No, you didn't." I tapped the ash from my cigar. "I set up that shell company 10 years ago," I said. "I named it Edicorp after your mother. I knew one day someone might try to make a move on the family business. I wanted to be the one sitting on the other side of the table if they did." Tyson let out a breath, a sound of pure disbelief. "So you bought the company. You bought it from yourself. I bought it from a thief," I corrected him. "But here is the kicker, son. Here is the part that is going to make you smile for the first time today." I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I haven't paid him yet." Tyson looked at me confused. But he saw the transfer. He showed me the alert on his phone. He saw a pending notification, I said. He saw a digital promise. But the contract has a clause buried in page 412 of the digital agreement. It states that funds are only released 24 hours after the physical verification of the original ink signature on the deed of sale. I smiled again. "And Brock just signed a digital copy on his iPad." Tyson started to laugh. It was a shaky, wet sound, but it was a laugh. "So he doesn't have the money." "He has zero," I said. "And in 24 hours when the transfer fails, he is going to realize he gave away the controlling stake of my company for free. He handed me the keys to the kingdom and he didn't even get a deposit." "But he will come for us," Tyson said, his laughter fading into fear. "When he realizes what happened, he will come for us." "Let him come," I said. "I am counting on it. But we won't be here." I tossed the cigar into a puddle. "Come on." We walked down the alley to a rusted steel door at the back of an old warehouse. It looked abandoned. The windows were boarded up. There was graffiti sprayed across the brickwork. A sign hung crookedly on the door reading "Condemned." Tyson hesitated. "Dad, this place looks like a crack den." I pulled a key from around my neck. A heavy iron key that looked like it belonged to a medieval dungeon. "Never judge a book by its cover, son," I said, unlocking the door. "That is what Skylar did to you. That is what Brock did to me." They looked at the surface and they thought they knew the story. I pushed the heavy door open. It swung inward on silent, well-oiled hinges. "Welcome to the bunker," I said. We stepped inside. The contrast was blinding. The exterior was a rotting shell of urban decay. The interior was a fortress of glass and steel. The warehouse had been converted into a state-of-the-art command center. Rows of server racks hummed with blue lights along the far wall. A massive bank of high-definition monitors dominated the center of the room, displaying live feeds from cameras all over the city. There were cameras on the funeral home, cameras on the exterior of our mansion, cameras inside the corporate offices. And right there on the center screen in 4K resolution was Brock. He was sitting in my leather chair in my office at the headquarters, pouring himself a drink from my crystal decanter. He looked smug. He looked victorious. Tyson limped into the room, his mouth open. "Dad, how long has this been here?" "Since the day you married Skylar," I said, closing the steel door behind us and engaging the 3 deadbolts. I walked over to the main console and typed in a command. The lights in the warehouse dimmed, focusing our attention on the screens. "I never trusted her, Tyson," I said softly. "A father knows when a wolf is in the henhouse. I built this place because I knew one day I would need to watch her without her watching me." I pulled up another screen. It showed bank routing numbers, code streams, GPS tracking dots. "We have 24 hours, I told my son. 24 hours before Brock realizes the money isn't coming. 24 hours before Skylar realizes she married a broke man. And 24 hours to set the trap that will bury them both." I looked at Tyson. He wasn't the broken man who had been crying in the rain 5 minutes ago. He was standing straighter. The fight was back in him. "What do we do first?" he asked. I pointed to the screen showing Brock celebrating in my office. First, we let him enjoy his drink, I said. Then we make him choke on it. I sat down at the keyboard. My fingers hovered over the keys. I wasn't just a retired old man anymore. I was the architect of their destruction. And the blueprint was already drawn. Get some rest, son, I said without looking back. Tomorrow we go to war. The blue light from the monitors washed over Tyson's face, making him look like a ghost in the machine. He was staring at the complex web of routing numbers and shell corporations I had pulled up on the main screen. To the untrained eye, it looked like chaos. To me, it looked like a symphony. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking softly in the silence of the bunker. I took a sip of water and watched my son try to untangle the knot I had tied around his enemy's neck. "You built a fake private equity firm," Tyson said, his voice full of awe and confusion. He pointed at the screen where the logo for Edicorp was displayed. It looked legitimate. It had a website. It had a board of directors listed. It had a physical address in a glass tower in Dubai. "I didn't just build a firm, son," I said, leaning forward. "I built a legend. I started Edicorp 10 years ago, right after your mother passed. I knew that in this world sharks smell blood, and when a man loses his wife, he looks weak. I needed a shark of my own. So I created one." I tapped a key and the screen changed. It showed a list of transactions. Millions of dollars moving back and forth between accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Zurich. "These transactions are fake," Tyson asked. "They are real," I corrected him. "But they are circular. I move my own money from my left pocket to my right pocket, and I pay taxes on it every time just to create a paper trail. To any due diligence officer, Edicorp looks like a heavyweight investor. We have credit ratings, we have prestige, and most importantly, we have a reputation for aggressive acquisitions." I looked at Tyson. When Brock saw the offer come in, he didn't question it because he wanted it to be true. Greed makes men blind, Tyson. It makes them skip the fine print. He saw an offer for 51% of the company at 20% above market value. He saw an escape route. He saw a golden parachute. But the money, Tyson said, rubbing his temples. He showed me the transfer confirmation on his phone. I saw the green check mark. I smiled. It was a cold smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. He saw a Swift message code, MT103, I explained. It is a standard banking communication. It tells the receiving bank that funds are incoming. But he didn't check the status code attached to it. I pulled up the contract on the screen. I scrolled down to page 412. It was buried in a section about compliance and anti-money laundering regulations. A section that nobody reads because it is boring and dense. "Read paragraph 4, subsection B," I told him. Tyson squinted at the screen. "Funds will remain in escrow pending biometric verification of the seller's physical presence at a designated secure facility within 48 hours of the digital signature. Failure to provide physical verification will result in an immediate recall of funds and a penalty fee of 10% of the total transaction value charged to the seller." Tyson looked at me, his mouth hanging open. "Physical presence," he whispered. I nodded. Brock signed the deal on his iPad while sipping champagne in my office. He thought digital was enough. He thought the world had moved on from ink and blood. But I wrote this contract, and I am an old school man. I tapped the screen again. The money he saw wasn't a deposit. It was a pending authorization. It was a ghost. It hovered in his account for exactly 24 hours to give him the illusion of victory, and in exactly 5 minutes that 24-hour window closes. I pointed to a countdown clock in the corner of the screen. When that clock hits 0, the money doesn't just stop coming, it reverses. And because he signed the agreement as the acting CFO, he is personally liable for the penalty fee. Tyson did the math in his head. 10% of a $50 million deal. $5 million, I said. Brock doesn't have $5 million. He spent his bonus on cars and watches. He spent your money on Skylar. When that clock hits 0, he isn't just broke. He is in debt to a shell company that I own, and I am not a forgiving creditor. We watched the clock. 5 minutes. 4. Tyson looked at me. "Dad, this is entrapment." "No, son, this is business," I said. "He tried to steal my legacy. I just made sure he paid for the privilege." The warehouse was silent, except for the hum of the servers. We were 2 men in a steel box waiting for a bomb to go off across town. I watched the security feed from my office. Brock was still there. He was laughing on the phone, probably ordering a new Ferrari. Skylar was sitting on the edge of my desk looking at diamond rings on her tablet. They looked like royalty. They looked untouchable. 3, 2, 1. On the screen in the office, Brock's phone buzzed. It wasn't a text. It was an alert. A loud jarring sound that cut through their celebration. I watched him pick it up. I watched the smile slide off his face like slop off a plate. He frowned. He tapped the screen. He swiped. He tapped harder. Then he stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward. "No," he mouthed. I could read his lips perfectly on the 4K monitor. "No, no, no." He started typing frantically on his laptop. Skylar looked up, her face twisting in confusion. Brock was sweating now. He was yelling at the screen. He grabbed his phone and dialed the bank. I reached for the burner phone on the console in front of me. It was a cheap black plastic rectangle. The only number that had this line was the contact number listed for Edicorp. It rang. I looked at Tyson. He was holding his breath. I picked up the phone. I didn't say hello. I just breathed into the receiver. "Who is this?" Brock screamed on the other end. His voice was high-pitched, bordering on hysteria. "Where is my money? The transfer failed. It says insufficient verification. It says penalty applied. Who is this?" I let silence hang in the air for 5 seconds, long enough for his heart rate to triple. "Hello, Brock," I said. My voice was deep, calm, and terrifyingly familiar. There was a pause, a long, heavy pause. "Winston," he whispered. It was a sound of pure disbelief. "Read page 412. "Son," I said, "you always were sloppy with the paperwork. I told you that when you were an intern. Details matter." You set me up," Brock stammered. "You are alive." "I am more than alive," I said. "I am the man who owns your debt. As of 30 seconds ago, you owe Edicorp $5 million for breach of contract. And since Edicorp is a subsidiary of a trust I control, you owe me $5 million. You can't do this," he screamed. "I sold the company. It is legal. I have the papers. You have a PDF file and a rejected wire transfer." I corrected him. "You have nothing. You sold 51% of nothing to nobody, and now you are trespassing in my office." Skylar was pulling at his arm in the video feed, asking what was wrong. He shoved her away. He looked wild. He looked like a man who was watching the walls close in. "I will kill you," he hissed. "I will find you, and I will finish what the poison started. You think you can play games with me, old man? I know where you live." "I don't live there anymore," I said. "And you don't have the resources to find me. Your credit cards are frozen. Your assets are being seized as we speak to cover your penalty. You are a ghost, Brock. You just don't know you are dead yet." He threw the phone across the room. I watched on the monitor as it smashed into the wall, shattering into pieces. The line went dead, but the show wasn't over. On the screen, Brock was tearing his hair out. He was overturning furniture. He kicked over a vase. Skylar was screaming at him now, realizing that the money was gone, realizing that her gamble had failed. He turned to her. I saw the violence in his eyes before he moved. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. He was blaming her. He was telling her it was her fault for not checking the old man. Her fault for not killing Tyson faster. Tyson stood up. His fists clenched. "Dad, we have to go there. He is going to hurt her. Sit down," I ordered. "Let them eat each other. It is part of the lesson." But Brock didn't hit her. Not yet. He pushed her onto the sofa and ran to the wall safe, hidden behind the portrait of myself that hung in the office. He punched in the code. I frowned. I had changed that code yesterday remotely. The safe didn't open. Brock punched it again. Nothing. He kicked the wall. He was locked out of the company funds. He was locked out of the petty cash. He was locked out of his own life. He pulled another phone from his pocket. A burner. "Tyson." "Look," I said, pointing at the screen. "He is making a call." "Who is he calling?" Tyson asked. "I don't know," I said. But judging by the look on his face, it isn't his mother. Brock was pacing the office, speaking rapidly into the phone. He was gesturing wildly. He pointed at the floor. He made a slashing motion across his throat. I tapped into the audio bug I had planted in the light fixture above my desk. The sound was crackly but legible. "I don't care how much it costs," Brock was saying. "I don't have the cash now, but I will get it. I need a cleaning crew. 2 targets, 1 old, 1 cripple. Yes, tonight. No police. I want them gone. I want them to disappear." He listened for a moment. "Warehouse district," he said. "I know where they might go." The old man has a storage unit down by the docks. Warehouse 4. Meet me there in an hour. Bring the heavy stuff." He hung up. Tyson looked at me, his face pale. He called a hitman. "He is coming here." I nodded slowly. "He thinks we are at the storage unit. Warehouse 4. "But we are at Warehouse 4, Tyson said, looking around the bunker. I smiled. "No, son. We are at Warehouse 1. This is the command center. Warehouse 4 is 3 blocks down. It is an empty shell. It is a rust bucket filled with old machinery and dust." I stood up and walked over to the weapon rack on the wall. I unlocked it and took down a pump-action shotgun. "He wants a meeting," I said, checking the chamber. "He wants to bring the heavy stuff." I tossed a heavy Kevlar vest to Tyson. "Put this on." Tyson caught it. "Dad, you said we were going to be smart. You said we weren't going to fight." "I lied," I said. "Sometimes being smart means knowing when to stop typing and start shooting." He just escalated this from corporate fraud to domestic terrorism. He called professional killers. That means the rules of engagement just changed. I pulled up the camera feed for Warehouse 4. It was a dark, cavernous space. Empty, except for a single chair in the middle of the room under a spotlight. "We are going to give him exactly what he wants," I said. "He wants to find us. He wants a confrontation." I looked at the screen where Brock was now loading a pistol he had taken from his briefcase. "He is bringing a knife to a gunfight," I said, "and he doesn't even know the gun is pointed at his head." I turned to the main control panel. I typed in a new sequence. "What are you doing?" Tyson asked, strapping on the vest. "I am preparing the welcome mat," I said. "Warehouse 4 isn't just empty storage, Tyson. It is where I keep the things I don't want people to touch. It is rigged." "Rigged with what?" I looked at him and my eyes were hard as flint. "Surprises," I said. I grabbed a set of earpieces and tossed one to him. "We are going to Warehouse 4. We are going to hide in the catwalks. And we are going to record everything. When his men show up when he gives the order to kill us, we will have it on video. And then we will drop the hammer." "But what if they find us?" Tyson asked, his voice trembling slightly. I pumped the shotgun. The sound was a promise of violence. "Then we remind them why the Carver name runs this city," I said. "Let's move. We have 45 minutes before the wolves arrive." We geared up and stepped out into the rain. The night was dark and the city smelled of ozone and danger. We were not victims anymore. We were hunters, and the prey was walking right into the cage. At Warehouse 4, the air tasted of rust and impending violence. Tyson and I sat in the center of the cavernous space under the single harsh spotlight I had arranged. It was theatrical, but theater was what Brock responded to. We looked defeated. I sat on an overturned crate, my hands resting on my knees. Tyson was in a folding chair, clutching his ribs, his face pale against the dark. We were the bait in the steel trap. The bay door rattled. Then with a grinding screech it rolled up. 3 black SUVs rolled in their engines, growling low. They parked in a semicircle, blocking the exit. The headlights cut through the gloom, blinding us. Brock stepped out of the lead vehicle. He had shed his corporate skin. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, revealing a gold watch that cost more than most people earned in a decade. He held a length of lead pipe in his hand, tapping it rhythmically against his leg. Behind him, 4 men emerged from the shadows. They were not corporate security. They were street muscle, the kind you hire in back alleys with unmarked bills. They carried baseball bats and tire irons. Brock walked into the circle of light. He looked at us with a mixture of loathing and triumph. "You thought you could hide," he spat. "You thought a computer glitch could stop me." I looked up at him, keeping my face impassive. "It wasn't a glitch, son," I said calmly. "It was a fail-safe. And it worked." Brock swung the pipe, smashing it against a metal drum next to me. The sound was deafening, a gunshot of metal on metal. "Shut up," he screamed, his face twisting. "I am done with your lectures. I want the override codes. I want the money released. Now." I shook my head slowly. "The money is gone, Brock. You can't override a zero balance." Brock nodded to his men. "Hurt him," he ordered, pointing at Tyson. 2 of the thugs stepped forward. They grabbed Tyson by his arms and hauled him out of the chair. He tried to struggle, but he was injured, weak from the crash and the stress. One of the men drove a fist into Tyson's stomach. My son doubled over, gasping for air, retching on the concrete floor. I felt a surge of cold fury, but I stayed seated. I looked up into the darkness of the rafters where the tiny red LED of a high-definition camera blinked, recording every frame. "Is that it?" I asked, my voice dripping with disdain. "That is simple assault, a misdemeanor. You want the codes, you have to earn them. Brock's eyes narrowed. He didn't like being challenged. Break his leg, he hissed. The thug with the baseball bat stepped up. He swung hard. The wood connected with Tyson's injured leg, the one already in the medical boot. Crack. Tyson screamed. It was a raw, agonizing sound that echoed off the metal walls. He collapsed, writhing in pain. I flinched internally, my heart breaking for my boy, but I kept my eyes locked on Brock. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. I listed my voice, steady and loud for the microphones. Attempted maiming. That is 10 years, Brock. You are racking up a bill you can't pay. Brock stormed over to me. He grabbed me by the lapels of my suit and hauled me to my feet. He slammed me against the metal pillar. His breath smelled of stale champagne and fear. You think this is a game, he shouted, spit flying into my face. I will kill him. I will beat him until he is nothing but a stain on this floor. And then I will start on you. Do it, I said. I stared into his eyes, seeing the madness there. Murder. Conspiracy. Life without parole. Do it, Brock. Show the jury who you really are. Hit me. He raised the pipe. His hand trembled. He wanted to do it. He wanted to silence the voice that had always told him he wasn't good enough. Do it, I roared. Be a man. He screamed and brought the pipe down, but the blow never landed. Crash. The wall of the warehouse behind us exploded inward. A white luxury SUV smashed through the corrugated metal siding like a battering ram. Metal shrieked and tore. Debris flew through the air, peppering the thugs with shrapnel. The car skidded across the concrete floor, tires smoking, and slammed into the side of Brock's black SUV, crumpling the hood. The thugs scattered, diving for cover. Brock froze the pipe, hovering in the air, his mouth open in shock. The driver's door of the white car flew open. Skylar stumbled out. She looked like a banshee. Her expensive funeral dress was ripped at the shoulder. Her hair was wild, matted with sweat and dust. Mascara ran down her cheeks in black streaks. She wasn't holding a purse. She was holding a small chrome-plated pistol. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Tyson. Her eyes were locked on Brock. You bastard, she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. You were leaving. Brock lowered the pipe slowly, confusion warring with fear on his face. Skylar, what are you doing here? You are crazy. I tracked your phone, she screamed, waving the gun. I saw the transfer request, a private account in Switzerland. Brock individual, not joint yours. She took a step forward, the glass crunching under her heels. You were going to kill them and leave me here, she yelled. You were going to run with the money and leave me to take the fall. The thugs looked at each other confused. This wasn't part of the job description. They lowered their weapons, backing into the shadows, sensing that the dynamic had shifted. Brock held up his hands. Skylar, baby, listen. You are paranoid. I was securing the funds for us. Liar, she screamed. She fired. Bang! The shot went wide, sparking off the concrete floor. Brock flinched, diving behind a crate. I heard you, she yelled, advancing on him. I heard you on the burner phone. 1 ticket to the Maldives. 1 ticket, Brock. Does that sound like us? She turned the gun toward me for a second, then back to Brock. I did everything for you, she sobbed. I poisoned my husband. I lied to the police. I destroyed my life for you, and you try to cut me out. I looked at Tyson. He was on the floor clutching his leg, but he was watching. We were witnessing the implosion. The rats were eating each other. Skylar kicked a chair out of her way. Come out, she screeched. Come out and look me in the eye. Brock peeked out from behind the crate. Skylar put the gun down. We need to deal with them first. They are the problem. No, she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You are the problem. They are just the victims. You are the villain. She looked at me, her eyes wild and pleading. Winston, tell him. Tell him I am the one who knows where the money is. Tell him he needs me. I stood up, brushing the dust off my jacket. I don't think he cares, Skylar, I said coldly. And frankly, neither do I. Brock took his chance. He lunged from behind the crate, tackling her. The gun went off again, the bullet hitting the ceiling. They rolled on the floor, a tangle of limbs and hate-screaming curses at each other. I looked up at the camera. I tapped my earpiece. Now, I said. The flashbangs I had rigged in the rafters detonated. A blinding white light filled the warehouse, followed by a concussive boom that knocked the wind out of everyone. The thugs fell to their knees, clutching their ears. Brock and Skylar froze, stunned. In the chaos, I grabbed Tyson and dragged him toward the shadows of the machinery. Let them fight, I whispered. We have the footage. We have the confession. But as my vision cleared, I saw Skylar rise. She had lost the gun, but she had grabbed a tire iron dropped by one of the thugs. She stood over Brock, who was dazed on the ground. "You want to spend the money," she screamed. "Spend this." She raised the iron bar. And then in the distance, the sirens began to wail. The emergency flashbangs faded into a ringing silence, but the war in the warehouse had only just begun. Skylar did not swing the tire iron. Her eyes darted to the floor where Brock's silver pistol had skittered during the explosion. She dropped the iron bar and scrambled on her hands and knees, her designer dress tearing against the rough concrete. Brock was shaking his head, trying to clear the concussion from his senses. He saw her moving for the gun. He lunged, dragging his good leg, but he was too slow. Skylar rolled onto her back, gripping the pistol with both hands. She didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. She pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Brock screamed a high, thin sound that tore through the air. He collapsed, clutching his thigh where a dark blossom of blood was rapidly spreading through his trousers. He writhed on the floor, agony etched into his sweating face. Skylar scrambled to her feet. She looked wild. The beautiful model was gone, replaced by a creature of pure survival instinct. She aimed the gun at Brock's head, her hands shaking violently. "You were going to leave me," she shrieked. "I saw the texts on your burner phone, Brock. 1 ticket, 1 passport. You were going to dump me in the river and fly to the Maldives alone." Brock gasped for air, his face gray with shock. "Skylar, listen to me. I had to secure the route first. I was going to send for you." "Liar," she screamed, stepping closer. "You used me. You made me poison him. You made me play the grieving widow while you planned your escape. I did everything for you. I destroyed my life for you." I watched from the shadows of the heavy machinery, my hand clamped firmly on Tyson's shoulder. My son was trembling. He wanted to rush out there. He wanted to scream at them. But I held him back. This was the moment we needed. The cannibalization of the enemy. The camera in the rafters zoomed in, capturing every bead of sweat, every drop of blood. The audio feed picked up the raw desperation in Skylar's voice. "You owe me, Brock," she yelled. "I slept with that cripple for 3 years. I pretended to love him while I waited for you. I mixed the poison into his food every single day, watching him get sick while you sat in your office counting the money." Tyson stiffened beside me. I felt the heat of his rage. Hearing it was different than suspecting it. Hearing her call him a cripple, hearing her admit the intimacy was a chore, it broke something inside him. But it also forged his resolve into something harder than steel. Brock laughed, a wet gurgling sound from the floor. "You enjoyed it, Sky? Don't pretend you didn't love the mansion. You loved the credit cards. You are just as greedy as I am. You are just mad because I was smarter." "I am smart," Skylar retorted. "I am the one holding the gun. And you are the one bleeding out on a warehouse floor." She cocked the hammer of the pistol. "Where is the money, Brock? Tell me the account numbers. Tell me the codes. Or I swear to God I will finish what the old man started." Brock looked up at her, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "The money is gone, Skylar." The old man froze it. It reversed. "We have nothing." Skylar screamed in frustration, a primal sound of rage. She fired again. The bullet sparked off the concrete inches from Brock's head. "Liar," she sobbed. "You have a stash. I know you do. You always keep a stash." I checked the monitor on my wrist. The police scanners were lighting up. They were 2 minutes out. It was time to escalate the pressure. Skylar lowered the gun slightly but kept it trained on Brock's chest. Her breathing was ragged. She looked like a cornered animal, realizing the trap has no exit. "You have to fix this," she sobbed, the anger suddenly shifting into desperate manipulation. "You have to get us out of here, Brock. You can't let me go to prison." "I can't walk," Brock groaned, clutching his leg. "It is over, Skylar. Leave me. Run." "No," she said, her voice rising in pitch. "I am not leaving without you, and I am not leaving without the money." "Why not?" Brock spat. "Why do you care? You would sell me out for a plane ticket in a heartbeat." "Because I am pregnant," Skylar screamed. The words hung in the air like smoke. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. "I am pregnant with your child, Brock. I took the test this morning. I am carrying your baby." Brock froze. He looked at her stomach, then at her face. He searched for the lie in her eyes, but he didn't find it. "Pregnant," he whispered. "Yes," Skylar cried, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. "It is yours. It has to be yours. It is a boy. I can feel it." Tyson let out a breath beside me. It was a sound of absolute devastation. He slumped against the metal beam, his eyes closing for a brief second. I looked at my son. I knew the secret he had kept even from Skylar. Tyson had suffered complications from mumps when he was 20 years old. He had been sterile for 15 years. He had never told Skylar because he was afraid she would leave him. He thought they could adopt one day. He thought love would be enough. But now, hearing her scream that the baby was Brock's, he knew. He knew that she hadn't just betrayed him with her body. She had betrayed him with her future. Even if he hadn't been sterile, she never would have carried his child. She had been building a family with his best friend while sleeping in his bed. She played us both. Dad Tyson whispered, his voice dead. She isn't just a murderer. She is a parasite. I squeezed his shoulder. And now the world knows it, son. Brock looked at Skylar. A strange expression crossed his face. A flicker of something that might have been humanity or perhaps just biological vanity. You are sure? He asked. I am sure, Skylar sobbed. Don't let them take me, Brock. Don't let our baby be born in a cell. Brock gritted his teeth. He looked at his bleeding leg. He looked at the gun in her hand. He looked at the bay door where the sirens were now wailing just down the street. Help me up, he said. I pulled out my phone. I opened the app that controlled the media feed. You want to see a magic trick, Tyson? I asked. I tapped the screen. Execute protocol Times Square. Thousands of miles away in the heart of New York City, the giant LED screens that dominated the intersection suddenly went black. Then they flickered to life. They didn't show an advertisement for soda or fashion. They showed a grainy, high-contrast video feed. It was Skylar holding a gun. It was Brock bleeding on the floor. It was the audio of their confession booming out over the tourists and the traffic. I poisoned him. I slept with him. I am pregnant with your child. The ticker scrolling across the bottom of the screen read, Carver Holdings executives confess to murder plot live. I watched the stock ticker on my phone. Carver Holdings stock, which I had shorted hours ago, began to plummet. Investors were panicking. The board was in chaos. The value of the company was evaporating by the second. But that was the plan. We would buy it back for pennies on the dollar when the dust settled. But the real impact was happening right in front of us. We heard the screech of tires outside. Blue and red lights flashed through the high windows of the warehouse, washing the walls in chaotic color. The police had arrived. Brock leaned on Skylar, his arm draped over her shoulder. She supported his weight, keeping the gun pointed at the door. They are here, Skylar hissed. We have to go, Brock said, gritting his teeth against the pane. The back exit. My car is parked in the alley. It is a junker. Untraceable. They hobbled toward the rear of the warehouse, moving past our hiding spot. They were so focused on the door they didn't see us in the shadows. I raised the shotgun. I could end it right now. I could shoot out the tires of their car. I could hold them here until the SWAT team kicked down the doors. But looking at them limping, bleeding, terrified, I realized that prison was too easy. They needed to run. They needed to feel the cold breath of the law on their necks. They needed to turn on each other when the money ran out and the hunger set in. Let them go, I whispered to Tyson. Tyson looked at me. Why? Because the hunt is just starting, I said, and now they have nowhere to hide. We watched them burst through the rear fire door into the rainy night. We heard the engine of an old sedan sputter to life and peel away just as the front doors of the warehouse exploded inward. Flashlights swept the room. Clear, clear. An officer spotted us coming out of the shadows. I held my hands up, still holding the shotgun by the barrel. Don't shoot, I called out. We are the victims. The officer lowered his weapon, recognizing me. Mr. Carver. Where are they? I pointed to the open back door swinging in the wind. They are running, officer, I said, but they won't get far. The whole world is watching them. I looked at the monitor one last time. The image of Skylar's face, twisted in hate, was frozen on the screen in Times Square. The rats were loose, but I had the trap, and I knew exactly what bait to use next. I sat in the passenger seat of the armored SUV while Tyson drove through the rain-slicked streets. The adrenaline from the warehouse was fading, replaced by a cold, mechanical precision. I opened my laptop, which was tethered to the car's secure satellite connection. It was time to execute the final phase of the financial dismantling. I called it the kill switch. It wasn't just about freezing their assets, it was about making them radioactive. I accessed the central banking mainframe using the administrative overrides I had installed years ago. I pulled up every account linked to Brock's social security number and every credit line attached to Skylar's name. I didn't just lock them, I flagged them with a level 1 federal alert for money laundering and terrorism financing. This meant that the moment they tried to use a card anywhere in the world, a silent alarm would trigger at the nearest FBI field office and the local police station. 30 miles outside the city limits, a beat-up sedan rolled into a dilapidated gas station. The surveillance feed from the station's security camera flickered onto my screen. It was them. Skylar was driving wearing a stolen oversized hoodie over her torn dress. Brock was slumped in the passenger seat, his face gray from blood loss. Skylar jumped out of the car. She looked frantic. She ran to the pump and swiped her platinum card. The light blinked red. She swiped it again harder. Red. She kicked the pump, screaming something that the audio didn't pick up. She ran inside the convenience store. I switched feeds to the interior camera. Skylar grabbed 3 bottles of water and a first aid kit. She threw them on the counter along with a different card. The clerk, a bored teenager, scanned the items and swiped the card. "Declined," he said, popping his gum. Skylar shouted at him, "Run it again! It is a black card. It has no limit." The clerk shrugged and swiped it again. This time the register let out a loud beep and a message flashed on the screen. "Confiscate card. Contact authorities." "Lady, the machine says I have to keep this," the kid said, reaching for the card. Skylar snatched it back, her eyes wild. She dug through her purse, pulling out card after card. Visa, Amex, MasterCard. She tried them all. Every single one came back with the same rejection. Insufficient funds, account frozen, stolen property. She had millions of dollars in credit limits an hour ago. Now she couldn't buy a bottle of water to wash the blood off her hands. She looked at the clerk, then at the water bottles. For a second I thought she would steal them. But the clerk pointed to the sign above his head. "We don't call 911. He reached under the counter. Skylar turned and ran. She ran out of the store empty-handed. She jumped back into the car, slamming the door. I zoomed in on the car's interior. Brock was conscious, but barely. "Did you get it?" he groaned. "No," Skylar screamed, hitting the steering wheel. "They cut us off. Everything. The cards are dead. We have no gas. We have no water. We are trapped." Brock looked at the fuel gauge. The needle was hovering on empty. "We need cash," he rasped. "We need to pawn something." "We have nothing," Skylar cried. "You lost the gun. I lost my jewelry in the warehouse. We are starving, Brock, and we are going to get caught." She looked at him, and I saw the hate in her eyes. The love, the partnership, the shared greed, it was all gone. It had been replaced by the raw panic of survival. "Why did I listen to you?" she spat. "You said you were a genius. You are just a loser with a bullet in his leg." "Shut up," Brock snapped. "Think. We need leverage. We need something the old man cares about." Skylar went silent. She looked out the window at the rain. Then a slow, terrible smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a demon realizing it still has one soul left to take. "I have it," she whispered. She reached into the back seat. I frowned. The back seat was piled with old blankets and trash. I hadn't paid attention to it before. Skylar pulled back a dirty quilt. Underneath, huddled in a ball and wearing his school uniform, was a small boy. My heart stopped. The world stopped spinning. The air left my lungs in a rush. It was Leo, my adopted grandson, Tyson's nephew, the boy we had sent to boarding school 3 states away to keep him safe from this exact madness. Leo looked terrified. His mouth was taped shut with silver duct tape. His hands were bound. Skylar grabbed him by the hair and pulled him up so his face was visible in the rearview mirror. "We have the golden ticket," she said to Brock. My phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized. It was a video call. I answered it, my hand shaking for the first time in 40 years. Skylar's face filled the screen. She was holding the phone with one hand and a pair of rusty scissors she must have found in the car with the other. The blade was pressed against Leo's neck. "Hello, Grandpa," she cooed, her voice dripping with madness. "Miss me." "Where is he?" I roared. "If you touch a hair on his head, Skylar, I will peel the skin from your bones." Tyson heard me. He slammed on the brakes, pulling the SUV to the side of the highway. He looked over at my screen and turned white as a sheet. "Leo." "Oh God, no." Skylar laughed. She looked deranged. The desperation had snapped something inside her. She wasn't playing a role anymore. She was pure chaos. "He is right here," she said. "I picked him up yesterday. I told the school there was a family emergency. I forged your signature, Winston. You really should update your security protocols." She pressed the scissors harder. Leo whimpered, his eyes wide and filled with tears. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "I want $10 million in Bitcoin," she said. "Untraceable. Transferred to a wallet I will send you. And I want a helicopter waiting at the old airfield in an hour." "You are insane," I said. "You will never get away with this." "Maybe," she said. "But if I don't get what I want, Leo takes a flying lesson without a parachute." "I am at the end of the line, Winston. I have nothing to lose, and people with nothing to lose are very dangerous." She looked at the camera, her eyes burning. "You have 1 hour. If I don't see the transfer, I cut his throat. And I will live stream it to the world just like you did to us." The screen went black. I sat there staring at the blank phone. A scream built in my chest, a primal roar of rage and terror, but I swallowed it down. Panic was a luxury I could not afford. Tyson was hyperventilating, hitting the dashboard, crying his nephew's name. I grabbed Tyson's shoulder. Stop it right now." He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, she has Leo. She is going to kill him. We have to pay her. We have to give her whatever she wants." "No," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It sounded like gravel grinding in a mixer. "If we pay her, she kills him anyway," I said. "She can't leave a witness, not now, not after what she has done." "Then what do we do?" Tyson screamed. "We can't call the police. She said she would kill him if she saw a cop." I looked out the window at the rain-soaked city. I looked at the skyscrapers and the shadows between them. I had spent the last 30 years trying to be a legitimate businessman. I had tried to be a pillar of the community. I had tried to wash the street off my hands. But you cannot wash away what is in your blood. I opened the glove compartment. I pulled out an old flip phone. A burner I had kept for 20 years, charged and hidden just in case. There was only one number stored in it. "Who are you calling?" Tyson asked, wiping his face. "I am not calling the police," I said, flipping the phone open. "The police have rules, the police have procedures, the police care about due process." I dialed the number. It rang once, twice. A voice answered, deep, rough, the voice of a man who had buried more bodies than a funeral director. "Yeah, it is Winston," I said. There was a pause, then a sound that might have been a chuckle. "Winston Carver, the ghost of Chicago. I thought you retired." "I did," I said. "But someone woke me up. What do you need?" "I need a hunt," I said. 2 targets, 1 woman, 1 man. They have a child. My blood." "Where?" "Northbound. In a gray sedan. They are desperate. They are armed." "Alive or dead?" the voice asked. I looked at the black screen of my smartphone where my grandson's terrified face had just been. I felt the cold steel of the revolver in my waistband. "The man is irrelevant," I said. "But the woman. Bring her to me. Unharmed. Unharmed." "Yes," I said. "Because I want to be the one who breaks her." "Understood." The line went dead. I snapped the phone shut and tossed it into the back seat. "Drive," I told Tyson. "Where?" "To the bridge," I said. "What bridge?" "The high bridge," I said. "The one where your mother died." Tyson looked at me confused. "Why there?" "Because Skylar is a narcissist," I said. "She wants to hurt me. She doesn't just want the money. She wants to destroy my soul. She knows that is the place that haunts me. She knows that is where I am weakest. That is where she is going." Tyson put the car in gear. His hands were shaking, but he drove. We merged back onto the highway, the engine roaring. I wasn't a CEO anymore. I wasn't a father. I was a monster. And I was coming to eat the children who had dared to touch mine. My phone buzzed against the center console. It was not a call, it was a notification. The same social media platform I had used to broadcast their crimes to Times Square was now sending me an alert. "User Skylar Carver is live." I felt a cold dread coil in my stomach that had nothing to do with the winter rain. I tapped the screen. The video feed loaded. The image was shaky and dark, illuminated only by the headlights of the car and the lightning flashing overhead. But I knew the location instantly. I knew the rusted iron railing. I knew the way the wind whipped the rain into a frenzy at that specific altitude. It was the high bridge, the place where my wife Etta had stood 30 years ago before the Depression swallowed her whole. Skylar was standing right at the edge. The drop behind her was 200 feet into the churning black water of the river. She was holding Leo. My grandson was sobbing, his mouth still taped shut, his small body trembling in the freezing wind. Skylar was holding him by the back of his coat, dangling him precariously over the railing. "Are you watching, Winston?" she screamed into the camera. Her voice was distorted by the wind, but the madness was clear. "Do you recognize this view? This is where she jumped, isn't it? This is where your heart broke the first time." I stared at the screen, my hands clenching into fists, so tight my knuckles turned white. She wasn't just ransoming the boy. She was performing a ritual. She was trying to break me by reenacting the worst moment of my life. "I am going to send him to Grandma," she shrieked, laughing, a sound that was torn away by the gale, "unless I see that Bitcoin in my wallet in the next 5 minutes." In the background of the video, I saw Brock. He was leaning against the railing, clutching his bleeding leg. He looked terrified. He wasn't looking at the camera, he was looking at the drop. "Sky, stop!" he yelled over the wind. "This is murder. Kidnapping is one thing, but this is a capital crime. Put the kid down." Skylar whipped around, dragging Leo with her. The boy's feet slipped on the wet metal grating. I gasped, reaching for the screen as if I could catch him. "Shut up, Brock," she screamed. "You don't have the stomach for this. That is why you failed. That is why I have to finish it." She pointed the gun at Brock, then back at Leo's head. 5 minutes, Winston, or the family reunion happens in the river. The feed didn't cut. She left it running, propping the phone up on the hood of the car. She wanted an audience for her atrocity. Tyson was driving like a man possessed. The speedometer was burying itself past 100 miles per hour. The engine of the armored SUV roared, struggling for grip on the slick asphalt. We were weaving through traffic, running red lights, leaving a wake of honking horns and confusion behind us. I opened my laptop, balancing it on my knees as the car swerved. I needed eyes on the target before we arrived. I needed to know exactly where they were standing. I needed to know the wind speed. I needed to know if I had a shot. I activated the tactical drone system I had installed in the roof rack of the SUV. It was military-grade technology, a remnant of a favor owed to me by a defense contractor I had bailed out in 2008. "Deploy," I commanded. A hatch on the roof slid open. With a high-pitched whine, the drone shot up into the rainy sky. I controlled it from my laptop, guiding it ahead of us. The camera feed stabilized, showing thermal imaging. I saw the heat signatures on the bridge. 3 figures. One small one sitting on the edge. 2 larger ones standing. I tapped into the city's traffic control grid. I didn't have time to hack it politely. I used a brute force override code that would likely shut down the entire district's grid in 10 minutes. But I didn't need 10 minutes. I needed green lights now. The lights ahead of us turned green. Cross-traffic stopped. Tyson floored it. "We are 2 minutes out," I said, my eyes glued to the drone feed. The thermal image showed Brock moving towards Skylar. Skylar raised her arm. A heat flare appeared. She fired a shot. Brock stumbled back. "She shot him," I said. Tyson drove faster. I zoomed in with the drone. The wind at the bridge was gusting at 40 miles per hour. It was too strong for a precision maneuver. I couldn't use the drone to distract her. If I crashed it into her, she might drop Leo. I checked the GPS tracker I had placed on the burner phone I gave to my contact. The dot was moving toward the bridge from the north. The wolves were closing in, but they wouldn't get there in time. It was up to us. Dad, Tyson shouted, gripping the wheel. "I can see the lights." Ahead of us, the bridge loomed out of the darkness, a steel skeleton against the storm. The gray sedan was parked in the middle, its hazards flashing. "Stop the car," I ordered. "Stop it 50 yards back. Do not spook her." Tyson slammed on the brakes. The SUV skidded sideways, tires screaming, coming to a halt just at the entrance of the bridge. We threw open the doors and stepped out into the storm. The wind hit us like a physical blow. It screamed through the suspension cables, making the entire bridge vibrate. The rain was horizontal, stinging our faces like needles. I saw them. They were silhouettes in the headlights. Skylar was standing on the pedestrian walkway, her back to the abyss. She held Leo in front of her like a shield. The boy's legs were dangling over the edge. One slip of her hand, one loss of balance, and he would be gone. Brock was slumped on the ground 10 feet away, clutching his shoulder. She had shot him. He was out of the fight. Skylar saw us. She screamed something, but the wind tore the words away. She waved the gun wildly. I held up my hands, showing her I was unarmed. I began to walk toward her. I didn't run. I walked with the slow, steady gait of a man walking to his own funeral. Tyson tried to follow me. "Stay back," I hissed at him without turning around. "If she sees you, she drops him. She hates you. She wants to hurt me. Let me take the heat." I walked closer. The wind roared in my ears. I could see Leo's eyes. They were wide and white with terror. He was looking at me. He was begging me. Skylar yelled again. "Where is the money?" I stopped 20 feet away. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black device. It was a cold storage wallet for cryptocurrency. It looked like a USB drive. "It is here," I shouted, my voice fighting the wind. 20 million. The code is on the back. Skylar's eyes locked onto the device. Greed warred with madness on her face. "Throw it," she screamed. "I can't," I yelled back. "The wind will take it. I have to hand it to you." I took another step. "Don't come any closer," she shrieked, leaning back over the railing. Leo's feet kicked at the empty air. I stopped. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I looked at the drop. I looked at the dark water below. I remembered Etta. I remembered the note she left. I remembered the funeral. I failed my wife. I would not fail my grandson. I looked at Skylar. I looked past the gun, past the madness. I looked at the woman who had tried to destroy my family. "You want the money, Skylar?" I said, my voice dropping to a calm register that cut through the panic. "Take it. It is yours. Just give me the boy. He is worthless to you. He is just weight." Skylar hesitated. She looked at the drive in my hand. She looked at the boy. She looked at Brock bleeding on the ground. She was calculating. She was trying to figure out if she could grab the money and drop the boy at the same time. And in that moment of hesitation, I saw the opportunity. It was slim. It was dangerous. It was insane. But it was all I had. I took a step forward, and the wind howled. The wind on the bridge was a physical force screaming through the steel cables like a choir of dying souls. I stood 20 feet from the edge holding the small black USB drive that contained a fortune I didn't actually have. It was a decoy, a prop. But to the woman standing on the precipice of insanity, it was the Holy Grail. Skylar stared at the device in my hand. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the strobe lights of the distant police cruisers that were still miles away. She was shivering violently, not just from the freezing rain soaking her torn dress, but from the fever of pure, unadulterated greed. I saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was doing the math. $20 million. A new identity. A life of luxury in a non-extradition country. It was everything she had killed for. It was everything she had destroyed her soul to obtain. And it was right there, just out of reach, held in the steady hand of the man she hated most in the world. "Bring it to me," she screamed, her voice cracking against the gale. "Walk it over here, Winston. Slowly. If you make a sudden move, the boy goes for a swim." I took a slow, deliberate step forward. The wet asphalt was slick under my shoes. I kept my eyes locked on hers, ignoring the terrifying sight of my grandson's small legs dangling over the black abyss. I needed her focused on the money. I needed her to forget about the child in her grip. I needed her to see only the gold at the end of the rainbow. "It is all here, Skylar," I shouted, my voice cutting through the storm. "The private keys are encrypted, but the password is your birthday. I set it up just for you. I knew you would want it easy." Her grip on Leo loosened just a fraction. Her hand reached out, fingers splayed, clawing at the empty air between us. She wanted it. She wanted it so bad she could taste it. Brock, who was slumped against the railing, clutching his bleeding shoulder, let out a groan. He pulled himself up to a sitting position. He looked at the drive in my hand, and then he looked at Skylar. I saw the realization hit him. He saw the way she was looking at the money. He saw that she had forgotten he existed. He saw his own death in her eyes. "Don't do it, Sky," he rasped, coughing blood. "He is playing you. It is a trap." Skylar didn't even look at him. "Shut up, Brock," she hissed. "You are useless. You are dead weight." I took another step. I was 15 feet away, close enough to see the terror in Leo's eyes, close enough to see the duct tape peeling slightly from his cheek in the rain. "I am not playing games, Skylar," I said, holding the drive higher. "I am buying my grandson's life. It is a business transaction. You give me the boy, you get the money. You walk away, you win." I saw her waver. The gun in her hand dipped slightly. The barrel moved away from Leo's head, pointing toward the ground. She was reaching for the drive with her gun hand. She was making the mistake. She was trading security for greed. I braced myself, ready to spring. ready to cover the distance in 2 seconds and tackle her before she could pull the trigger. But I wasn't the only one watching. Brock let out a roar of pure desperation. He wasn't going to die on a bridge while she walked away with his millions. He wasn't going to let her win. With a burst of adrenaline fueled by hate, he lunged. He threw himself from the railing, scrambling on his hands and knees toward me. He wasn't trying to save the boy. He was trying to get the drive. "Give it to me!" he screamed, blood spraying from his mouth. "It is mine. I earned it." Skylar snapped. The spell of the money broke. She saw Brock moving toward her prize. She saw the man she had conspired with, the man she had slept with, the man she had shot, trying to steal her victory one last time. "No," she shrieked. "It is mine." She swung the gun back toward him. She didn't hesitate. There was no love left in her heart, only a cold black void where her humanity used to be. She fired. The sound of the shot was swallowed by the wind, but the flash lit up the night. The bullet hit Brock in the chest. It was a center mass shot. He stopped moving instantly. His momentum carried him forward a few inches, and then he collapsed face down on the wet pavement. He didn't scream. He didn't twitch. He just slid. The slick surface of the bridge combined with the slope of the drainage was too much. Brock slid past me. He slid toward the edge of the bridge where the railing had rusted away years ago. He went over without a sound. One moment he was there, a pile of greed and ambition and cheap suits. The next moment he was gone, swallowed by the darkness and the river below. Skylar watched him fall. She didn't blink. She didn't cry. She turned her wild eyes back to me. The gun was smoking in the rain. "Now it is just us," she said, a terrible smile twisting her face. "No more partners. No more splitting the pot. Give me the money, Winston, or I swear to God I will drop him." She tightened her grip on Leo's coat. The boy cried out a muffled sound of pure panic. She leaned him further back. He was slipping. His feet were scrambling for purchase on the wet metal, but there was nothing there. He was hanging by the fabric of his jacket, held by a madwoman who had just murdered her lover. I stopped moving. I was 10 feet away. Too far to grab her. Too close to run. If I rushed her, she would drop him out of reflex. If I stood still, she would drop him out of spite. I needed a weapon. But I didn't have a gun. I didn't have a knife. All I had was the truth. And the truth I had was the most dangerous weapon of all. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had poisoned my son. I looked at the woman who claimed to be carrying the future of my family. "You want the money, Skylar?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low rumble. "You want to provide for your child, the baby you say is inside you?" "Yes," she screamed, tears mixing with the rain. "My baby, Brock's baby. I need this for him. I need to survive." I shook my head slowly. I put the USB drive back in my pocket. "There is no money, Skylar," I said. "And there is no baby." She froze. "What are you talking about?" "I am talking about the lie you told to save your skin in the warehouse," I said. "I am talking about the fantasy you spun to manipulate a dying man. You aren't pregnant, Skylar. You can't be." She laughed, a high manic sound. "How would you know, old man? Did you install a camera in my uterus too?" I felt it. "I know it. It is Brock's." "It can't be Brock's," I said, stepping closer. "And it certainly can't be Tyson's." "Why not?" she hissed. "Because my son is sterile," I roared, the words tearing out of my throat like a physical blow. Skylar flinched as if I had slapped her. "What?" "Tyson," I shouted over the wind. "He had mumps when he was 20. Complications. He has been sterile for 15 years, Skylar. He never told you because he was afraid you would leave him. He thought you wanted a family. He thought he wasn't enough." I saw the doubt creep into her eyes. I saw the gears turning. "You are lying," she whispered. "He never said that. We tried. We were trying. He let you try because he loved you," I said, relentless. "He let you hope because he didn't want to break your heart. But he knew he could never give you a child, and he knew that if you ever got pregnant, it wouldn't be his." I pointed at the spot where Brock had vanished. "And Brock," I continued. "Brock had a vasectomy 3 years ago. I know because it was on the company health insurance plan that I paid for. I saw the claim, Skylar. I approved it." The color drained from her face, leaving her pale as a ghost. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The reality of her situation was crashing down on her. The lie she had told to manipulate Brock, the lie she had told to save herself, it was impossible. She wasn't pregnant. She was just desperate. and in her desperation she had convinced herself of a miracle that could never happen. She looked down at her stomach. She touched it with her free hand, the hand holding the gun. The weapon wavered. "No," she whimpered. "No, that is not true. I felt it. I felt—" "You felt fear," I said. "You felt the walls closing in. You invented a reason to live, Skylar. But it is a lie. Just like your marriage, just like your grief, just like your life. I took another step, 5 feet. You have nothing, Skylar. No money, no lover, no baby, no future. You are standing on a bridge in the rain with a kidnapped child and a murder charge. It is over." She looked up at me. Her eyes were empty. The madness had burned out, leaving only a hollow shell of a human being. She looked at Leo. She looked at the boy she was threatening to kill. And for the first time, she seemed to really see him. Not as leverage, not as a ticket out, but as a child she was about to destroy for nothing. The gun lowered. Her grip on Leo's jacket loosened. "It is all a lie," she whispered. "Everything." "Yes," I said softly, "but you can still do one true thing. You can let him go." She looked at me. Then she looked at the abyss behind her. "I can't go back," she said. "I can't go to prison. I can't be nothing." "You won't be nothing," I said. "You will be the woman who did one right thing at the end." She hesitated. The wind whipped her hair around her face. She looked like a tragic figure from a Gothic novel, a woman destroyed by her own ambition. Leo, sensing the change in her grip, did what any terrified child would do. He didn't wait for her to decide. He didn't wait for me to save him. He fought. He twisted his body violently. He sank his teeth into the hand that was holding his coat. He bit down with all the strength of his 8 years. Skylar screamed. She recoiled, her hand flying open. Leo dropped to the pavement. He didn't wait. He scrambled away on his hands and knees, crawling toward me as fast as he could. Skylar reached for him, but she missed. She stumbled. Her heels slipped on the wet metal grating. She flailed her arms, trying to regain her balance, but she was too close to the edge. She tipped backward. I lunged, not for the boy. Tyson was already there, gathering Leo into his arms. I lunged for her. I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the part of me that still remembered the girl my son had fallen in love with. Maybe I just wanted to see her face the justice she deserved. My hand closed around her wrist just as she went over. The jolt nearly pulled my arm out of its socket. I slammed into the railing, my ribs groaning. I looked down. Skylar was dangling over the black water. She was holding onto my hand with a death grip. Her eyes were wide, looking up at me. The gun had fallen into the river. "Help me!" she screamed. "Daddy, help me!" I looked down at her. I looked at the woman who had poisoned my son. I looked at the woman who had almost killed my grandson. I looked at the woman who had called me daddy in a plea for salvation. I tightened my grip. I wasn't going to let her fall. Death was too easy. Death was an escape. I pulled. I gritted my teeth and hauled her up inch by inch. She scrambled, kicking at the bridge, trying to find a foothold. I dragged her over the railing and threw her onto the wet asphalt. She lay there gasping, coughing, sobbing. I stood over her. I was panting, my heart racing. "I am not your father," I said, my voice cold as the rain. "And you are not my daughter. You are a prisoner." Blue lights flooded the bridge. The cavalry had finally arrived, but the war was already over. I looked at Tyson holding Leo. I looked at the broken woman at my feet, and I knew that the real work was just beginning. The rain-slicked wire cables of the bridge hummed like a tuning fork struck by the hand of God. My shoulder socket screamed in protest as Skylar's full weight jerked against my grip. She was dangling 200 feet above the churning black water that had just swallowed her lover whole. Her fingernails dug into my wrist, drawing blood mixing with the rain that lashed against our faces. I looked down into her eyes. They were wide saucers of absolute terror, reflecting the strobe lights of the approaching police cruisers. Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the greed. In that moment, she was just a terrified creature realizing that gravity does not negotiate. "Please," she shrieked, her voice raw and tearing against the wind. "Don't let go, Winston. Please, I am sorry. I will do anything. Just pull me up." I gritted my teeth, feeling the muscles in my back spasm. It would be so easy to open my hand. It would be so easy to let physics take its course. The water below was freezing and fast. She would be dead before she hit the surface. It would be justice. It would be an eye for an eye. She had tried to kill my son. She had tried to kill my grandson. She had poisoned our lives for money. Why should I save her? Why should I risk my own life on this slippery precipice for a monster? You wanted to kill me, I roared over the gale. You wanted to erase my family, Skylar. You stood in my house and plotted my death. Why should I pull you up? Give me one reason why I shouldn't let you join Brock. She sobbed, swinging in the wind, her feet kicking uselessly at the empty air. Because I am family, she wailed. Because you are a good man, Winston. You are not like me. You are not a killer. Her words hit me harder than the rain. She was using my own morality as a weapon. She was betting her life on the fact that I was better than she was. And the worst part was, she was right. If I dropped her, I became her. If I dropped her, I let the darkness win. I looked at her face distorted by fear and rain, and I didn't see a daughter-in-law. I saw a broken thing that needed to be put in a cage, not a coffin. I planted my feet wider on the slick asphalt. I locked my knees. I took a breath that tasted of ozone and exhaust fumes. I wasn't going to let her fall, not because she deserved to live, but because she deserved to suffer. Death was too quick. Death was silent. I wanted her to hear the cell door slam. I wanted her to grow old in a concrete box, knowing exactly what she had thrown away. I am not a killer, I growled, my voice low and dangerous. But do not mistake mercy for weakness, girl. I am not saving you for redemption. I am saving you for the judge. I pulled. I put 50 years of hauling lumber and laying brick into that heave. My joints popped. My veins bulged. I dragged her up inch by agonizing inch. She scrambled, scratching at the wet metal of the bridge railing, trying to find purchase. Her expensive shoes slipped and squeaked. She was heavy with the weight of her sins, but I didn't stop. With a final roar of effort, I hauled her over the railing. She tumbled onto the wet road, landing in a heap of torn fabric and bruised skin. She lay there gasping, coughing up water and bile curling into a fetal ball on the yellow line of the highway. She looked up at me, shivering violently. She reached out a trembling hand toward my ankle. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered brokenly. "Thank you for saving me." I looked down at her. The disgust I felt was colder than the storm. She was still trying. She was still trying to manipulate. She was still trying to play the role of the vulnerable child. I stepped back out of her reach. I looked at her with eyes that had seen too much of the world's ugliness to be fooled by a few tears. "I am not your father," I said, my voice flat and final, cutting through the noise of the wind. "And you are not my daughter. You are not a Carver. You are a stranger, and you are under arrest." I didn't offer her a hand to stand up. I didn't offer her a coat. I reached down, grabbed the collar of her ruined dress, and dragged her across the pavement toward the flashing lights of the police cruisers that had just screeched to a halt at the end of the bridge. The officers swarmed us, guns drawn, shouting commands that were lost in the wind. I didn't flinch. I hauled Skylar to the front bumper of the lead cruiser and threw her onto the hood. She hit the metal with a thud, letting out a cry of pain, but she didn't fight. She was done. The fight had left her the moment her feet touched solid ground. "Take her," I told the officers. "Attempted murder, kidnapping, grand larceny, and whatever else you can find in the wreckage of her life." 2 officers grabbed her arms, pulling them behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of closure. It was the sound of safety. Skylar didn't go quietly. As the reality of the cold steel cuffs bit into her wrists, she snapped. The relief of survival was replaced by the horror of the future. "No," she screamed, thrashing against the officers. "You can't take me. I am pregnant. I am a victim. He tried to kill me. Winston tried to throw me off the bridge. Look at him. He is crazy." She looked at me, her eyes wide and manic, searching for a sympathy that wasn't there. "Tell them, Winston," she pleaded. "Tell them I saved the boy. Tell them I tried to stop Brock." I looked at the officer in charge. It was Chief Thorne who had arrived with the backup. He looked at Skylar, then he looked at me. "We have the live stream," Mrs. Carver, Thorne said calmly. "We saw everything. The whole city saw everything. You holding the boy, you shooting your partner, you confessing to the poisoning. It is all recorded." Skylar stopped, struggling. She looked around at the circle of police officers, at the flashing lights, at the darkness of the bridge. She looked at Tyson, who was sitting in the back of an ambulance holding Leo tight, wrapped in a thermal blanket. She looked at the life she had destroyed, and then she screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure rage, a primal animal sound of a predator realizing it has become the prey. She howled at the sky, cursing me, cursing Tyson, cursing the rain. They shoved her into the back of the cruiser. She kicked the window, screaming until her voice gave out. I watched her face pressed against the glass, distorted and ugly. I turned away. I walked over to the ambulance. Tyson looked up at me, his eyes red but clear. Leo was asleep in his arms, exhausted by the trauma. "Is it over?" Dad, Tyson asked quietly. I looked back at the bridge where the dark water continued to flow, indifferent to the human drama above. "It is over, son," I said. "Let's go home." We got into the ambulance, leaving the flashing lights and the screaming woman behind us. The war was won, but looking at my family huddled together in the warmth, I knew the healing would be a much longer battle, and I was ready for that one too. 3 months later, the air inside the visitation room of the maximum security women's penitentiary smelled of industrial bleach and stale despair. I sat on the metal stool, my hands folded calmly on the cold steel table. The glass partition between us was thick, scratched, and smeared with the grease of 1,000 desperate pleas. I waited. When the guard brought Skylar in, I almost didn't recognize her. The glamorous woman who had strutted through my son's funeral in a custom Givenchy dress was gone. In her place was a hollowed-out shell. Her prison jumpsuit hung off her skeletal frame. Her hair, once a glossy mane of blonde extensions, was now a dull, matted brown showing inches of gray roots she had successfully hidden for years. Her skin was sallow, her eyes sunken and rimmed with dark red circles. She looked 20 years older. She looked like what she was inside. A ruin. She sat down and picked up the phone receiver. Her hands were trembling. She looked at me with a mixture of hatred and pathetic hope. "You came," she said, her voice tinny through the speaker. "I knew you would come." I picked up my receiver. "I didn't come for you, Skylar. I came to close the file." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against the glass. "Winston, listen to me. You have to help me. My lawyers are idiots. They are talking about a plea deal for 25 years. 25 years, Winston. I will be an old woman. I can't do that time. I will die in here." "You should have thought about that before you mixed thallium into my son's protein shake," I said, my voice flat. "You should have thought about that before you dangled an 8-year-old boy over a bridge." "I was desperate," she hissed. "I was sick. I can plead insanity. I can tell them Brock forced me. But I need better lawyers. I need the dream team. You have money, Winston. You can hire them for me. If you get me out, I will sign whatever you want. I will give up all claims to the estate. I will disappear." I looked at her. The audacity was breathtaking. Even in a cage, she was still trying to negotiate. She still thought she had leverage. "You already have the best lawyers in the state," I said. "The firm of Sterling and Moss. They charge $500 an hour. They are sharks." Skylar nodded frantically. "Yes, but they aren't listening to me. They keep missing filing deadlines. They lost the motion to suppress the video evidence. They are letting the prosecutor walk all over them. They are incompetent." "They aren't incompetent," I corrected her. "They are under new management." She froze. "What do you mean?" I leaned in closer to the glass. 2 weeks after your arrest, the firm of Sterling and Moss faced a sudden liquidity crisis, I explained calmly. Their main line of credit was called in by the bank. They were facing bankruptcy. A private holding company stepped in and bought out the partners. They acquired the firm, the debts, and the client list, including you. Skylar stared at me, her eyes widening. "Who bought them?" she whispered. "Edicorp," I said. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a corpse. "You," she breathed. "You own my lawyers. I own the building they sit in," I said. "I own the desks they work at. And I own the billable hours they are charging to your frozen accounts." I gave the managing partner a very specific directive. I told him to provide you with a defense that follows the letter of the law but lacks the spirit of it. I told him not to use dirty tricks. I told him not to call in favors. I told him to let the justice system work exactly as it was designed to work for a guilty woman. "You can't do that," she screamed, slamming her hand against the glass. "That is illegal. That is conflict of interest. I will tell the judge. Tell him I said. Tell the judge that your father-in-law bought a law firm to ensure you didn't buy your way out of a murder charge. See if he cares. The judge has seen the video, Skylar. He has seen you hold a child over a river. He doesn't want you to have a good defense. He wants to lock you away and throw away the key, and my lawyers are going to make sure he has every piece of paperwork he needs to do it." Skylar slumped back in her chair. The fight went out of her. She realized the walls weren't just closing in. They were built by me. "Why?" she sobbed. "Why go this far? You won. I am in jail. Why do you have to destroy every hope I have? Because you took my son's hope," I said. "You took his health. You took his trust. You took his ability to believe in human beings. You didn't just try to kill his body, Skylar. You tried to kill his soul. And for that, I will make sure you never see a sunset that isn't behind a chain-link fence again." I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't want to hear her begging. I stood up and signaled the guard. As I walked out, I looked back one last time. Skylar was screaming into the dead receiver, banging her fists on the glass, mouthing the word "monster" over and over again. I didn't feel like a monster. I felt like a janitor who had finally cleaned up a very messy spill. But Skylar was the lucky one. I walked down the long gray corridor toward the exit thinking about Brock. I hadn't visited him. I didn't need to. I had the reports from my contacts inside the state penitentiary. Brock had survived the gunshot wound and the fall, but the river had taken a toll. He had broken his back on a submerged rock. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He was confined to a wheelchair in a facility that was not designed for accessibility or mercy. He was in the general population unit of Ironwood Correctional. It was a hard place, a place where status meant everything and weakness was a death sentence. I had made sure his status was clear before he even arrived. I had used the same network that helped me find him to spread the word among the inmates. I didn't tell them he was a corporate embezzler. That would have earned him respect. White-collar crimes are seen as smart. No, I told them the truth. I told them he was a man who kidnapped a child. I told them he was a man who helped a woman try to drown an 8-year-old boy. In prison, there is a hierarchy of morality. Murderers are tolerated, thieves are accepted. But crimes against children are the bottom of the barrel. The reports I received were brief but graphic. Brock wasn't just an inmate. He was a target. His wheelchair made him slow. His crime made him hated. He had been transferred to the infirmary 3 times in 2 months. Broken fingers, scalded skin from hot water thrown in the showers. He lived in a state of constant terror, sleeping with one eye open, knowing that every time the cell block doors opened, it could be his turn again. He had wanted to live like a king. Now he was living like a rat in a cage full of cats. He would live a long time. I ensured he had the best medical care to keep him alive, but he would never live a single day without pain. He would never live a single day without looking over his shoulder. I stepped out of the prison into the bright sunlight. The air tasted sweet. It tasted of freedom. I got into the back of my car. Tyson was waiting for me. He looked better. The bandages were gone, replaced by a thin scar on his forehead. He was walking with a cane now instead of crutches. "Did you see her?" he asked. "I saw her," I said. "How is she?" "She is exactly where she belongs," I said. We drove away from the prison, leaving the concrete fortress behind. Skylar would spend the next 60 years in a 6x8 cell. She would age, she would wither, she would be forgotten. The world would move on. The company would grow. Leo would graduate. Tyson would heal. But she would stay there frozen in time, reliving the moment she let go of my hand on the bridge. She would realize that the hell she was in wasn't created by the judge or the jury. It was created by her own choices. And that realization, I knew, would be a torture far worse than anything I could ever inflict. She was dead to the world. We were just waiting for her body to catch up. 1 year later, the sun rose over the Carver estate, but it didn't look like the same place anymore. The cold, gray shadows of betrayal had been burned away by 12 months of hard work and healing. I sat on the terrace, drinking my morning coffee, watching my grandson Leo chase a soccer ball across the lawn. He wasn't the terrified boy taped up in the back of a sedan anymore. He was loud. He was fast. He was happy. His laughter was the best return on investment I had ever seen. Tyson walked out onto the patio. He didn't need the cane anymore, though he still walked with a slight hitch in his step, a permanent reminder of the night we took back our lives. He was dressed in a suit, but it wasn't the stiff armor he used to wear when Skylar was controlling him. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who knew exactly who he was. "Good morning, Dad," he said, pouring himself a cup. "The quarterly reports are in. I didn't look at the papers. I didn't need to. I knew the numbers." After the scandal at the warehouse and the bridge, Carver Holdings stock had crashed to rock bottom just as I predicted. Wall Street hates uncertainty, and nothing is more uncertain than a C-suite executive confessing to murder on a billboard in Times Square. But chaos is a ladder if you know how to climb it. While the market panicked, Edicorp, the shell company I controlled, quietly bought back every single share. We took the company private for pennies on the dollar. We purged the board of directors, removing everyone who had been loyal to Brock. We restructured, we rebuilt, And when we relaunched 6 months ago, we didn't just recover. We soared. We are up 40%, Tyson said, smiling. The Affordable Housing Initiative in the South Side broke ground yesterday. The press is calling it the comeback of the decade. I sipped my coffee. It is not a comeback, son, I said. It is a correction. We just cut out the rot. Tyson looked at Leo playing in the grass. She wrote to me again, he said quietly. Skylar. I didn't flinch. I knew she would. Desperation is a persistent beast. What did she want? She wants a character reference for her appeal, Tyson said. She says she has found God. She says she is a changed woman. She says the baby would have been real if she hadn't fallen. She is still lying, I said, even to herself. She thinks if she says it enough times, it will become true. I burned the letter, Tyson said. I didn't even open the second page. Good, I said. Keep burning them. She is a ghost, Tyson. Do not let her haunt this house again. A black sedan pulled up the driveway. It wasn't the police. It was Sarah Jenkins, my attorney. She stepped out carrying a thick briefcase. She looked like a woman who had just hunted down a very elusive prey and skinned it. Sarah, I said, standing up to greet her. You look like the cat that ate the canary. Better? She said, placing the briefcase on the patio table. I am the cat that found the canary's secret stash. She opened the case. Inside was a stack of financial documents stamped with the seal of a Swiss banking authority. We found it, she said. It took 12 months of forensic accounting and 3 court orders, but we cracked Skylar's encryption. I looked at the papers. She didn't just want your money, Winston Sarah explained. She was skimming off the top for years. She was diverting funds from the company charity account. She was taking kickbacks from contractors. She was building a nest egg. How much, I asked. $5 million, Sarah said. Sitting in a numbered account in Zurich. She thought it was her insurance policy. She thought that even if she went to prison, she would come out to a fortune. Tyson looked at the number. That is our money. That belongs to the company. Technically, yes, Sarah said. But since it was laundered through the charity fund, it is legally gray. We could repatriate it back to the general ledger. I looked at the documents. $5 million, blood money, stolen from orphans and sick children to fund a murderer's retirement plan. No, I said. We don't want it. Tyson looked at me. Dad, it is $5 million. It is dirty, I said. If we put that back into the company, it stains the ledger. It brings her back into our business. I want her erased. Then what do we do with it? Sarah asked. I looked out at the garden where my wife Etta used to spend hours tending to her roses. She had always wanted to open a center for children who had nowhere else to go. A place where kids like I used to be could find safety and a warm meal. She never got to do it. The depression took her before the dream could take root. I picked up a pen. We are going to build it, I said. Build what? Tyson asked. The Etta Carver Center for Youth, I said, writing the name on the back of the bank statement. We are going to take every cent of Skylar's secret fortune and we are going to use it to build the one thing she hated most, a home for children. I looked at Sarah. I want you to transfer the funds today. I want the ground broken by next month. And Sarah, there is one more thing. Name it, she said. I want a receipt, I said. I want a framed official receipt of the donation. I want a plaque listing the source of the funds, and I want you to mail a photograph of that plaque to the Ironwood Correctional Facility. You want to send it to Skylar. Sarah asked, a slow smile spreading across her face. Every month, I said. I want her to know. I want her to sit in her cell and look at that photo. I want her to know that the money she stole, the money she killed for the money she betrayed her family for, is being used to buy winter coats and hot lunches for kids she would have crossed the street to avoid. It is the ultimate punishment, Tyson said softly. You aren't just taking her freedom. You are taking her victory. You are turning her greed into good. It is justice, I said, and it is tax deductible. Sarah laughed, snapping the briefcase shut. Consider it done, Winston. I will mail the first one personally. That evening, as the sun began to set, painting the Chicago skyline in hues of purple and gold, I sat alone on the porch. The house was quiet. Tyson had taken Leo to the movies. Sarah had gone to execute the transfer. It was just me and the ghosts. I reached down beside my chair and picked up a bottle. It wasn't the $1,000 scotch Brock used to drink. It wasn't the vintage champagne Skylar used to order. It was a $10 bottle of red wine I bought from the corner store. The same wine Etta and I used to drink when we were first married, sitting on the fire escape of our first apartment dreaming of a better life. I poured a glass. The liquid was dark and rich. I swirled it, watching the legs run down the side of the glass. They thought money was the power. That was their mistake. They thought that because I lived simply because I drove an old car, because I didn't flash my wealth, that I was weak. They didn't understand that true power isn't about what you can buy. It is about what you can protect. I took a sip. It tasted like grapes and earth and victory. Brock was in a wheelchair fighting for his life in the prison showers. Skylar was staring at a concrete wall waiting for a lawyer who would never come. And I was here. I raised my glass to the empty chair beside me. "We did it, Etta," I whispered into the twilight. "The weeds are gone. The garden is safe." I thought about the journey, the pain, the betrayal, the moment on the bridge when I held the life of a monster in my hands and chose not to become one myself. It had been the hardest year of my life, but it had also been the most clarifying. I learned that you cannot buy loyalty. I learned that blood does not make you family, love does. And I learned that sometimes you have to burn the house down to kill the rats in the walls. I finished the wine and set the glass down. I felt a deep, profound sense of peace settle over me. The kind of peace that only comes when the ledger is balanced and the debts are paid. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore. I wasn't waiting for the knife in the back. The wolves had come for the old lion, and they had found that he still had teeth. I stood up and walked to the railing, looking out over the city I had helped build. The lights were twinkling on. Life was moving forward. My name is Winston Carver. I am 68 years old. I have millions in the bank, but tonight I feel richest because of what isn't there. No lies, no snakes, no poison, just the truth. And that, my friends, is a wealth that no thief can ever steal. If you enjoyed this story of justice and revenge, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you would have pulled Skylar up from that bridge or if you would have let gravity do the work. I read every single comment. Until next time, keep your circle small, keep your eyes open, and never underestimate the old man in the corner. He might just be the one holding all the cards. This ordeal taught me that the most dangerous snakes often smile at you across your own dinner table. I learned that money is nothing but a magnifying glass. It doesn't change people. It just shows you exactly who they really are. Skylar and Brock chased the shine of gold and lost their souls in the darkness. I chose to protect my blood, even if it meant burning down the empire I built to save it. True wealth isn't what you can show off to the world. It is the quiet peace of knowing you stood tall when the storm came. Never apologize for protecting your own. If you believe justice was served cold today, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of retribution. Tell me in the comments below, would you have pulled Skylar up from that ledge, or would you have let gravity do the work? I read every single one.